Hello guys, welcome back. Let's begin with a new story, The Trip into the Dekuverse by Demon Heart 12. Please check his profile on fanfiction. Net. The link is in the description. The first universe. It was an ordinary day in the school UA. The students have just finished their classes as they went back to relax in their dorms, but both hero courses decided to have a sleepover in the dorms of 1A, since 1B's homeroom teacher was more relaxed and would allow his students to do something like this. Once they got permission, they went to 1A dorms where they were greeted by their homeroom teacher. Izuku sighed, "Listen, Vlad's problem, children. Honestly, I couldn't care less about what you do. Just keep it down. Tomorrow's a weekend, and I prefer to sleep, not stay up because you have a howler monkey that drank a ton of energy drinks." He finished saying the last part as he eyed Monoma, who deflated in Ibara's bindings since he tried to stop them only for the religious girl to tie him up and dragged him here. Izuku didn't like the idea, but it wasn't a bad idea to let them blow some steam every once in a while. Kendo said, "Don't worry, sir, if he tries anything, I'll knock him out." The nighttime hero looked at her as he said darkly, "I'll take you up for your word, cause if you don't, believe me when I say you'll wish that the LOV turns into a Nomu after the training I will put you through." His eyes flashed red as Kendo hugged Setsuna in fear of whatever their rival class teacher was preparing for her if she failed. The man then walked away as Kendo looked at the blonde boy, "Monoma, I swear if you do anything, I will put you through so much pain that you'll forget your name." Got it? The boy nodded so quickly that his head seemed like it's about to fall off his body. He knew that Kendo meant her threat. Great. She now looked at dorms as she pushed the doors open, saying, "Yaro Momo, we're here." They looked and saw that the entire class of Wana was there waiting for them, even Bakugo, though the latter was tied up with Zero's tapes and was put in an ice cage to prevent him from escaping, with Todoroki fixing it every time it began to melt. Kendo laughed as she asked Momo, "Do the ice prison have room for one more inmate?" She pointed toward Monoma, who was probably refusing to share the same cell with a student of 1A. Momo nodded as she went to the ice prison, opened the ice door, and allowed Ibara to throw the blonde boy next to Bakugo, who glared at him, with the other blonde returning it with the same intensity if not more. The night went on as everyone was having fun and talking with each other. Boys were playing video games, girls were talking about their crushes, and all of them played truth and dare. The next morning everyone woke up after a good night's sleep only to see that they were in a void of nothing. The first to point out that was Izuku, who said, "Guys, is it only me, or are we only in a void of some sort?" Momo woke up next only to notice this, saying, "I don't think so unless we're having some kind of mass hallucination, but that's not the case since I'm sure that cake Sotome didn't have Komori's mushrooms in them." The girl, who was mentioned, blushed a little when she remembered an accident where she put some experimental mushrooms into the pizza she was making. Let's say that everyone was thankful that no one without a steel quirk jumped off the third floor. Bakugo, who woke, noticed that he wasn't in tape anymore, jumped up asking, "What the F is happening here? What did you do, you shitty extras?" He finished as he pointed his finger toward Class 1B. Monoma, who was out of his bindings, then said, "Why are you accusing us? It's usually you Class A nutcases that attract trouble." A raspy voice then echoed, "Can you be quiet? I'm trying to sleep." Bakugo and Izuku turned to see Shigaraki spread on the ground with a red blanket. Both of them readied themselves for combat, but their quirks didn't activate. "What did you do to my quirk, you bstrd?" Bakugo then yelled, demanding an explanation. "Bakugo, calm down so we can understand what's happening," Izuku said as he tried to use his quirk, but nothing happened. He then looked at the LOV members who were all present, even All for One was present. That means a being of stronger power brought them here. He looked around and saw all the teachers were there, with All Might being held back by present MIC and Midnight for attacking All for One. There were also some mothers of his students, some heroes, 7 individuals who he didn't know, some villains, Kota, the big 3, Mai, Shinso, Shoto's siblings, and Sir Nightai. Wonderful, the dead were coming back, he thought. All for One then looked at All Might, saying to the other teachers, "Let him come here, it's not like I can do much damage. I can't access my quirks." He then looked at All Might, saying, "But don't you want to catch up with your MSTR?" he said as he pointed into a certain direction. All Might then looked and saw Nana Shimura laying down on the ground as she groaned, rubbing her head from the pain, as she asked, "What in the world just happened?" she was quickly tackled by All Might into a hug, who was crying from happiness. "MSTR, you're alive." The blonde hero cried as the other users of One for All looked in shock at what was happening. The first user looked at his brother, who shrugged, telling him this wasn't his doing. The woman, confused, said in shock, "Hey, I guess I'm alive, aren't I? I wouldn't say alive, more like in limbo for the current state." A familiar voice echoed throughout the void. Everyone looked up only to see Midoriya floating in the air. This caused mixed reactions, as they didn't know that Midoriya could do this until Izuku spoke up. "Guys, I'm still down here," he said, but then added, "I think at least everyone calm down so I can explain everything." Everyone now looked at the floating Izuku as he said, "For starters, you can call me Discord by my hero name in my world, or what's left of it, that is. See this void? That was my universe before it went out." Gasps echoed. Even AFO was shocked that someone managed to destroy the universe. "Don't worry, it happened naturally. I calculate that it will return back about 3 billion years later." "Mr. Discord," Uraraka called out, "can you tell me why you look like Deku?" "All right, my good friend." Discord disappeared before appearing down beside them as he began his explanation. "You see, I am Izuku Midoriya, or at least a version of him. In my world, the entity of chaos tried to possess me to try and escape his punishment, but he failed and I managed to take his powers. I was thought to be quirkless till I was 15, to which I did something that activated my powers. All Might was there and offered me his power, and before you ask, a brief history of AFO and OFA was transferred into everyone's head." "Good. Save your questions for later. And for someone who actually cares, I refused because the previous Chaos Spirit warned me that I would die." Discord went on to explain what happened in his world, from his training to his time in UA, his marriage with his world's version of Pony, the war with LOV, and finally the end of the universe. Mina was the first to break from her shock as she looked at Pony, who was blushing like crazy, and she said, "DMN Pony, I didn't know you have in you, girl, to actually marry the cinnamon roll of our class. It must have been an experience." The horse girl began to mumble something in English, but was shocked when Ibara whacked her. Saying language, the girl was shocked that the Vine girl actually understood her, given that English was her worst subject, but then Discord said, "Yeah, in here, I made it so that everyone gets to understand everyone." The girl blushed as her friend understood what she said. Nezu looked at the Chaos user, before asking the entity that brought them here, young Midoriya. He stopped for a moment, remembering that Izuku is older than AFO, so he restarted, "Mr. Discord, do you care to explain why you brought us here?" The entity appeared before him, and said, "Why does anyone do anything?" He then took a dramatic pose, sheer absolute boredom. Jiru then said, "You seriously brought us here because you're bored?" "Yes," he started, "but believe me, you'll have a blast because today you'll be granted the experience of traveling through the Dekuverse." All the individuals were shocked that they will be watching different versions of their friend. It was Ai who was brave, and stood up asking, "Does that mean I will see different versions of Mr. Deku save me?" The being nodded his head as he gave Ai a candy apple along with Kota. Aizawa then said, "Dekuverse, like, do you mean you will show us different versions of Problem Child?" He looked at Discord, who nodded his head. The hero then asked, "Can I get my sleeping bag, so I can protect myself from EMI?" Aizawa said, pointing to Ms. Joke, who was trying to hug him. Aizawa's wish was granted, and he slept in his sleeping bag. Izuku then said, "Me, can I ask a question?" He just needed to know something that irked him. "Shoot," Discord replied, already knowing what his question is. "You said different versions of me, so does that?" He was cut off when Discord said, "Me, expel Dekus, married Deku, quirkless hero Deku, quicked Izuku, superpowered Deku, not by quirks like me, villain Deku, vigilante Deku, Deku at the beginning of quirks, no quirk universe Deku, in other words it's going to be quite the dozy." He finished shocking Izuku with how many versions of himself were out there, but he was slightly irked by the idea that there were villain versions of himself. He gulped as he saw his friends looking at him, so he said, "So guys, are you ready?" "Izuku, is it true that you have All Might's quirk?" Uraraka asked him. Izuku was now afraid that his friends will hate him because they discovered his secret. He nodded his head, but he was shocked when Okako said, "That's so awesome, Deku." To have All Might acknowledge you that he gave you his quirk. That's so cool. Todoroki then stood in front of him, and he said, "So does that mean that you're All Might's secret love child?" This caused a huge silence to float as Shoto's mom slapped her forehead, while Darby was laughing his head off with Shoto's siblings. Izuku's sweat dropped. "No, he gave me his quirk. He didn't marry my mom." Before anyone can say anything, Discord then said, "All right, I know all of you want to say how manly Izuku is, how cool he is to have All Might give him his quirk, but you have to know that everything that happens here will be forgotten, so it doesn't cause disturbance to the stream of time." This made Tokoyami say, "Revelry in the dark." Discord looked at him and said, "Nice song, but stop referencing it for everything, or I swear I will pop a world where you're a girl, and you're in a relationship." This made the raven-headed boy's feathers ruffle, his equivalent of blushing. "All right, now that everything is taken care of, shall we put this show on the road?" Discord asked. A screen then appeared as Discord said, "Let the roulette begin." He said as the screen showed the names of different worlds appear on it, but finally, it landed on one. Expelled Izuku. Aizawa cringed as he said, "I have a seriously bad feeling about this." After the explanation of AFO and OFO was transported for him, he felt like an absolute DJ bag for the way he treated his student during the quirk apprehension test. And by the name of this world it means that Izuku's finger trick didn't impress that version of himself. He only hoped that Shota let him down easily and didn't berate him too much. Discord then said, "Get ready, here it begins." The world suddenly changed and it was now on the field where Aizawa made his test. All 1A students shivered remembering this day, causing it was the scariest moment of their lives, and now Momo was afraid as she knew from this world that Aizawa was serious about the whole expelling thing. It showed the usual thing that happened with 1A, Bakugo throwing the ball, Mina saying it is fun, the tests, and finally Izuku's ball throw. Izuku stood there clutching his finger, as he said with a victorious smile, "Sensei, I'm still standing." The boy had tears in his eyes. Was it out of fear or happiness? Aizawa couldn't tell, but he knew one thing: the boy failed the objective he gave him, which was to control his quirk without hurting himself. What a waste of a good quirk. "Why are smiling as if you've made the find of the century?" he said to Izuku, making the smile drop. "I asked you to show me that you can control your quirk, but you only showed me that you can limit the damage. Did you honestly think that this will save?" Aizawa slapped his forehead as he said, "If you want to expel him, then do it. No need to belittle him and destroy him." Vlad then said, "Yeah, I kinda agree that this is taking it over the top. And this is the reason I read my students' files before I enter the classroom. Tell me, is it a waste now?" the BLD hero said with a smirk at the nighttime hero, who groaned knowing that he will have to change his ways to avoid things like these in the future. Discord made a note to put this into Aizawa's head to change his methods later on. "But I'm still standing." Izuku was cut off by Aizawa's scarf wrapping around him. "So what? Tell me, can you redo the rest of the exams now?" Izuku Midoriya, in my entire history of teaching I never saw anyone who was so arrogant that he thought that they don't need to train their quirk. You are a disgrace to every person standing here. You don't deserve to be a hero, and I will make it my personal mission to blacklist you from every hero school possible, because if you neglected training your quirk, you will neglect hero training, and only become a liability in the field. Having a heroic spirit is something, but you don't have the will, control, or even the demeanor to back it up, so go home, you're expelled." Aizawa's declaration was followed by Bakugo's laughter. Silence was now ringing in the area, both in that world and among its viewers. Everyone was shocked that Aizawa would say something like this, or that he'll promise to destroy somebody's future because he thinks he isn't serious about being a hero. Ibara then said, "Dear Lord, I heard some of Aizawa-sensei's methods were a bit extreme, but this is taking it a bit too much. Tell me about it," Vlad said, shocked that his colleague could be capable of such cruelty. He himself has expelled students from before, but it was always due to behavioral issues and disrespect, but this version of Aizawa takes the cake for being cruel. He knows the hero world is not all sunshine and rainbow, but there is no need to be that cruel. Why would Aizawa-sensei say such horrible things to Midoriya? Toru asked. Even though she wasn't a close friend of his, the girl could say that she respected his work ethic and how he constantly trains to further improve his quirk. It was truly inspiring. Aizawa-sensei, the girl, looked at their homeroom teacher with concern. The man looked like he had just seen a ghost in front of him. She was sure after learning the truth about Izuku's power, that her teacher must feel horrible for not letting him explain. The man in question had his eyes wide as he looked at that version of himself, not believing the amount of hatred and malice that dripped with every word he spoke. He finally spoke up, "How illogical of that version of me. So, you also see it?" Discord asked to see the man nod his head from his sleeping bag. A then said, "What are talking about, Mr. Deku?" "Well, you see, Discord began to speak, Aizawa really dislikes All Might, and when I say dislike him I mean really dislikes. So that world, Aizawa saw that myself have a similar power to All Might, and he allowed himself to project all his hatred on him." He then stopped for a moment before adding, "This one did the same, but he was able to control it, and not allow it to cloud his judgment." AFO then raised his hand, and got his answer before he asked his question. "No, he didn't join you guys, but you'll see other worlds where you got Ofa in a very easy way." The man smiled, but All Might shivered with the previous users of Ofa and Izuku knowing that there are worlds where AFO have Ofa. Izuku then looked at his teacher who had a face of guilt, so he went to him, and said, "It's not your fault, Aizawa-sensei. You couldn't have known about this." The man smiles at his student, before looking back at the scene. Izuku looked at the man with pain in his eyes as he tried to say something, but he couldn't. Aizawa then said, "Well, you heard me. Beat it. I have other tests to finish." On the side of the field, All Might was clutching the wall so tightly that it almost broke from the pressure. The man was past his patience point. He was now ready to go and to Texas smash that person to Saturn's rings for the way he was treating his successor. To think that a teacher would bow so low, make it his personal mission to blacklist him. "Hey, that won't happen unless I have something to say about it," All Might thought. He was about to go and confront them, but a voice spoke up in Izuku's defense. "You can't expel him. He's a true hero." Aizawa, All Might, Izuku, and the other students all looked at Okako. Mina and Toru smiled as they said, well, it seems even in there you seem to have a crush on Midori." The gravity girl then began to float in embarrassment as she saw that version of herself put everything on the line for her friend with her friends teasing her. The other girls then began to tease her till Discord said, "I don't know what you're teasing her about. I mean that are many worlds where every one of you is either a couple with him, or are married to him and have children from him, even female version of some of the males. I mean during my time I saw a little of female Todoroki, Bakugo, and even Kirishima married to him," said boys all blushed with Bakugo growling like an animal waiting to be released. They all turned back to the scene to what else happened. Aizawa smiles darkly at Okako as he asks, "And oh please, do tell me why I can't expel him." The girl shivered under the man's gaze, but steeled herself as she said, "Because he's a true hero. He risked his life to save me when nobody did." This caused Ida to clutch his fist, remembering how he ran away that day. "If it wasn't from him that day, I would have been horribly injured for life or dead at worst. But he has no control." The teacher was shocked when the girl cut him off, "And that's why we are here to learn how to control our quirks. You're just making excuses to expel him, and I won't stand for it." The teacher, having enough of this, said, "Uraraka, do you want me to expel you?" The girl then said, "No, don't." Everyone, except the villains, was shocked at how Okako backed down quickly, but Discord then said, "Don't count your chickens yet. You need to be patient. Continue watching and then judge." Everyone nodded their heads and continued to watch to see what Discord was talking about. Okako then continued saying, "Because there's no need for it. I'm going to leave UA." All the hero students were shocked at how Okako quit UA just for someone she believed in. Izuku himself looked at the scene with guilt as he felt that he was responsible in that world for the destruction of his friend's dreams. Okako saw this and quickly went to his side and held his hand saying, "Don't think about it, Deku. That version of myself made her choices for the thing she believes in, so this isn't your fault. Don't go blaming yourself." The boy could only nod as he blushed from the hand contact. It was then that Ida stepped in saying, "Uraraka, I understand what happened, but don't anything rash." He was cut off by the girl. "Ida, my parents always told me to do what I think is right. So today, I'm going to stick with my gut and do what it tells me is right." The boy shocked stepped back as he said, "I just hope you are doing the right thing." Ida was shocked at her statement. Deep down, he knew she was right. No one was supposed to go through this public hazing. It was like their teacher had it for Midoriya from the start. Now that he thinks about it, it seemed that Izuku's scores were seriously low, even lower than some of the students who were less fit than he was. Okako then stalked forward, grabbing Izuku's hand, and said, "Come on, Deku. Let's go. We have hero schools to sign in them." She then dragged him away, leaving a very confused Aizawa wondering how this happened for a moment before shrugging and saying, "Anyone else wants to humor her craziness?" When no one answered, he said, "Good. Let those two be a lesson on who can't become a hero, those who don't train their quirks, and those who are here to be friends. Now, let's get back to the tests. Seriously, you think that if a hero tried to form friendships, they are doomed to fail?" Midnight asked before adding, "Shouter, wasn't your friendship with both Hisashi and Oboro that lead you to become the hero that you are today?" "What?" Toru asked, shocked. "Mr. Friends are in the way of heroics actually became a hero because he had friends." She then looked at her teacher's sleeping form and yelled, "I call hypocrisy, Aizawa-sensei." The man looked at her from his sleeping bag and glared, "Why don't we talk about this when we get back, Hakugu? I'm sure I would be more than happy to explain my point of view and make it clearer to you." The tone he used made the girl shiver, knowing that this promised more horrific training. She then backpedaled, saying, "No need to. I think I heard wrong. Continue the good work, sensei." The hero then looked away from her, as she sighed with Tsuyu, saying, "Nice save. He almost got you there." Back in the classroom, Okako came back from talking with her parents and telling them what happened. She half expected them to be mad at her, but she was shocked when they praised, telling her that they were proud of her for making what she thought was the right decision. Plus, they told her that UA has a refund policy for students who are expelled or withdraw, so no harm was done. Okako's father then said, "DMN right, I would be proud of her for following her own sense of justice. This means that she's going to be a great hero." The girl could only hug her father in happiness. Okako sat in front of Izuku, who was slowly putting his stuff in his bag after returning from Recovery Girl's office. She looked at him and smiled, saying, "Deku, please don't look sad. I'm sure that any hero school out there would want you." The boy looked at her and asked, "Why? What do you mean why? Why did you do this? Why did you throw your dream away for me?" The boy shouted, shocking her. "He's right, you know. In my entire life, I was nothing but a worthless waste of space. And now that I have a quirk, I am still that same worthless nobody that can't save anyone's life even if it depended on it. So why did you sacrifice everything for someone so worthless like?" The boy was caught off when he felt something slap his cheek. Shigaraki then cringed as he said, "Ouch, that's definitely gonna hurt in the morning." This caused the girl who did it to blush heavily as she began to float away, with Tsuyu using her tongue as an anchor to hold her from floating into the abyss. Ida then said, "Though that was an unorthodox way of doing things, good work, Uraraka, that really snapped him out of it." Said girl from her floating position lifted a thumbs up to the boy, who was blissfully unaware of how horrible she felt right now. "Stop. Don't ever say that ever again. You are not worthless. You are not a nobody, and most importantly you're a hero. My hero. When everybody ran away that day, you were the only one who walked to save, so that makes you a hero in my books, unlike what that bully said." The boy looked at her as tears began to flow from his face. The girl quickly embraced him in a hug, blushing heavily, but she patted his head saying, "It's all right, let it all out. I promise we're going to be the world's greatest heroes, Deku." The boy then pulled away red-faced, although he had a small smile as he wiped his tears away. "Thank you, Uraraka," he then added, "but could you stop calling Deku?" The girl was confused at the request as she asked, "But isn't that your name?" She could have sworn that Mr. Exploding Breathes called him a Deku when he was expelled. AFO then said, "Really, I'm sure everyone knows that the name means useless." This made the girl blush as she said, "I thought it meant Dekiru like you can do it." The girl explained herself to the 200-year-old villain, ignoring Bakugo, who was sent off after being called Mr. Exploding Breathes, before asking, "And why am I speaking to you so casually as if you're my friend?" This made even the villain raise an eyebrow, or he would if he still had them. He looked around to see various villains sitting around with heroes and talking with them, and discussing their opinions about what they were saying. He looked up only to see Discord smiling, "So I assume you made some changes here so that we can treat each other casually without the fear of us trying to rip each other apart." The entity of chaos only gave him a thumbs up. "Now, let's continue," he said as he pointed to the scene. "No, not really." The boy continued to wipe his tears as he said, "It's a name that Kaken made for me. It actually means that I'm useless and worthless." The girl looked in confusion thinking about this Kaken person, but she concluded that he must be a Mr. Exploding Breathes. She then quickly apologized, saying, "I'm really sorry. I didn't mean it that way. I thought I meant a Dekiru. It just gives off a you can do it vibe, if you know what I mean." The boy's eyes widened as the girl now gave him a positive meaning to that DMN nickname that have haunted him from childhood. He then smiled at her saying, "You know what, I don't mind you calling me that. It sounds better coming from you." The girl blushed as she looked away from embarrassment. A cough then drew both their attention. "So that's how you stopped feeling annoyed whenever I called you by that name. And here I thought you grew in it and owned it. Turns out, you needed a girl." Bakugo was cut off. "In some worlds, you date her." This made Uraraka cry, knowing that some versions of herself date Bakugo, with the other girls counseling her. Bakugo only scoffed as he looked away. Okako was now looking at an old bony man who looked like he hadn't eaten in years. The man walked inside the room and introduced himself. "My name is Toshinori Yagi, and I was young Midoriya's personal trainer by the request of All Might himself." The girl was shocked by the fact that All Might himself supervised Izuku's training, while the boy was shocked that he learned All Might's real name. "My employer saw what happened earlier, and he was truly disgusted by the way Eraserhead acted. His behavior was neither that of a hero or a teacher. He tried to change Aizawa's decision, but alas, there are things even the number one hero can't do," he said, making Uraraka sad, but he carried on. "But he was impressed by your spirit, young Uraraka, and how you stood up for what you thought was right, so he told me to send both of you an offer." This made the girl giddy with joy as both she and Izuku nodded their heads before Toshinori explained his offer. The girl then scratched her head saying, "I wonder what the offer might be. I mean, this All Might, so he might be planning on taking us to another highly known school such as Shiketsu, or somewhere else. But that doesn't solve the problem of the black mark on Deku's record." Momo then said, "Well, he's the number one hero after all. I mean, he could just have taken you both under his wing and helped till you got your provisional hero license. I mean, it's not the first time a hero was a sidekick without having any formal education." This made both Izuku and Okako sparkle in happiness, since being All Might's sidekick sounded like the coolest thing ever. Aizawa then looked at a smiling All Might and said, "I blame you for the eventual death of Izuku and Okako of that world if you do decide and take them under your wing given your state. I don't agree with the actions of my alternate self, however, taking them under your wing is an idea that's 10 times even worse than what I did." All Might wanted to scoff, but Aizawa was right. In his state, if that version of himself took them under his wing, they would have ended up dead or worse. Discord then said, "If you're all done talking, how about you all look back at the scene, cause this is where the story is happening." The others then looked back at the scene as it began to shift and change, leaving everyone thinking, where is it going to right now? If you told Okako a week ago that she would have the number hero himself in her home praising her and offering her parents a one-in-a-time opportunity for her hero education, she would have called you a nut job. If you told her that the number hero was pulling all the strings he has in the USA to give her and her friend Deku a full scholarship in one of the most prestigious hero schools in the country, Xavier's School for Gifted Youngsters, she would have thrown you into the orbit since you were being too cruel to her. Now regarding the scholarship, at first her parents refused, saying that they couldn't afford it, but All Might said that he will take care of everything regarding the expenses, and also gave her parents a bunch of contacts to which he was going to recommend their company for when he heard their financial struggles. But right now she couldn't believe it. She was standing in Denver airport, with Deku waiting for All Might's biggest fan in the USA to pick them up. And that would be it was the #1 hero in the country's Star and Stripe. She looked at her friend who was beaming with joy, for 2 reasons: he was meeting a hero, a famous one at that. And he finally learned how to control his quirk. It only took conservation about machinery in her parents' company and orange juice of all things for him to figure it out. She literally couldn't stop laughing when he compared himself to an orange juice. Laughter filled the area, as Izuku tried to melt into the ground. Even All Might was so distracted that he actually held AFO for support as he said, "Young Midoriya, you truly are quite funny." He then regained himself saying, "Wait a minute, why didn't I go with him?" Discord then answered, "Because you had a feeling that if you left Japan something bad was going to happen, and good thing you didn't." All Might nodded, clearly seeing that this version of himself knew that he needed to stay, so he entrusted his pupil to Star and Stripe. He then asked, "Did young Midoriya succeed?" Discord nodded, and held a huge 10 sign signaling him that everything went okay with Izuku. Ida then tried to ask something, but was cut short. Yes, albeit barely, if it wasn't for Todoroki showing on time and Stain encouraging him to use his fire quirk. Ida breathed a sigh of relief, while Shoto seemed kinda out of it since it was Stain who inspired him to use his fire. Discord then added, "Then again, you did manage to survive the same events, albeit also barely. This time with some permanent scars," he said as he looked at Tsuyu, who got the message. They waited at the airport for around half an hour before finally, a woman with blonde hair accompanied by a man with green curly hair came. Izuku saw them and smiled. He then began crying as he hugged the green-haired man, who hugged him back saying, "Hi there, champ. Ready to go to school? And what happened to stop being a cry-baby?" The boy looked at him and said, "I'm sorry, Dad. I just missed you so much." Okako on the side smiled at the family reunion. Izuku's dad then noticed her and smirked. "Izuku, is that the appealing girl that stood up to you when Eraserhead tried to single you out?" The boy blushed, as did Okako, while Hasahi laughed at their misery only to be whacked by the blonde woman who said in English, "Hasahi, you're a grown man, and yet you can't act like it." Said man then pouted and looked away. Izuku then dared himself to ask, "Excuse me, but are you?" The woman smiled as she said, "Yes, I'm America's #1 hero, Star and Stripe. My name is Kathleen Bate. It's nice to meet both of you. From now on, I'll be personally training you both on behalf of All Might." She then winked at Izuku, signaling to him that she also knew about OFA. She carried their bags and said, "Well, let's go. Sure, All Might managed to score a full scholarship for both of you, but that doesn't mean you don't have to train and slack off. Xavier's school isn't for the weak-hearted. So are you up to the challenge?" Both of them smiled as they said, "Yes'm." And with that, a new chapter in their life began. Discord then looked at the audience and said, "So what do you think?" Author's notes: hello guys, to new fanfic of mine, and something that I've been planning to do for a while now. I hope you all like the first chapter. This is it for now. As always, please take care of yourselves, tell me your opinion about the current chapter, and give me suggestions for an alternate world, but just don't go too plus ultra. And finally, I hope you all enjoy reading my work and see you next time with a brand new chapter. Second universe, so what do you think? Discord asked as he summoned for himself and Nezu 2 smoothies out of nowhere and 2 chairs to lounge on. Izuku answered him, "Well, it seems interesting seeing this world. I mean, seeing myself expelled was shocking, but the events that happened after it was quite astounding. But that begs the question, does this still happen in other worlds, or do I, for example, become a vigilante? Or as AFO said, do I join the villain side because I feel mistreated by the hero community? And you said that there are versions of me with quirks. Does Aizawa-sensei mess up their scores as he did with me, or does he only do it with me or versions of myself that have a weak quirk or quirkless?" The last questions made Eraserhead pop out of his bag as he mentally said, he knew. The questions continued to stream on, but he was finally silenced by a huge gush of water from a power hose courtesy of Discord, who simply said, "So this how it feels to be on the giving end of it?" He looked at the soap boy and said, "It depends on the condition. For example, if you were quirkless, there is a higher chance that the entire class will be expelled than you, because Aizawa knows that you only managed to enter the hero course through your skills. That is always accompanied by the fact that doesn't allow his prejudice affect his judgment, and he expels for being quirkless, and from there you go on different paths, joining Stain." This made Ida pale, knowing what damage Izuku's notebooks will do in Stain's hands. Become a vigilante, join the LOV. This made Shigaraki smile, knowing that some versions of the Golden Boy joined them. Become a police officer, like Might said, since you finally lost hope, or simply killing yourself for having your dream snatched from you without even being given a chance to prove yourself. The last statement made Aizawa pale. Momo then said, "That's quite interesting, and we're only talking about the things that may come to mind." She then shook her before looking at Izuku, saying, "And Izuku, what do you mean when you said that Aizawa-sensei messed up your scores?" This caught everyone's attention. The boy blinked before saying, "You didn't know?" "I thought everyone knew at this point that sensei kinda messed up my scores to expel me. I am and still am more fit than Mineta, Gyro, Kaminari, and Hakugyur, so it was odd that I scored lower than them." He then turned to the mentioned four and said, "No offense, guys." They simply waved their hands, agreeing with him that he was more fit than they were, also wondering how he got last in the test. Kendo then commented, "But I don't think that your teacher would sabotage, Izuku." She then looked at the sleep-deprived hero and asked, "Isn't that right, sensei?" The hero didn't answer, making some of the students feel uneasy. He finally looked at Izuku, "If you knew that I was sabotaging you." This made Kendo's eyes go wide, along with everyone else, with Shigaraki chuckling and saying something about how heroes are corrupted. "Why didn't you say anything?" "Easy, what would have that done?" Izuku replied before adding, "I mean, my entire life my teachers were always signaling me out. The moment you started giving subtle looks of anger, and how I got 12 on the running test, though I passed only after a couple of moments after Kaken really gave you out. The thing that really exposed it was the grip strength test, since I found mine was impossibly hard, but when I carried the one Shoji and a couple of others used, they were easier. From that moment on, I knew I was targeted. The only reason I was shocked when you stopped from the ball throw was that I thought I lost my chance at keeping my spot." Aizawa could only look in shame as his student explained how he was onto him from the beginning. An awkward silence filled the air, mixed with the silent laughter of villains on how heroes were ready to destroy each other. Shigaraki then said, "You know something, it's weird you joined the hero side after everything you went through being quirkless. What a waste of potential." Izuku wanted to reply, but stopped, knowing that arguing with the insane decay user would result in nothing but a strong headache. Discord then said to Shigaraki, "You should see the worlds where he's accused of being the UA traitor, and how quickly everyone turns on him." This made Izuku's eyes go wide, along with All Might, with Shigaraki shaking his head. Before any questions can be asked on his last statement, Discord clapped his hands as if nothing happened, and said, "Let keep this show moving." The scenes then began to change as Nezu appeared beside Discord. Both of them then lounged on a chair, and shared a toast for chaos, as the rap principal, who was now invested in this event, said, "What a good day for chaos." Discord replied, "You really liked me back when I was a student, even made me your personal student, and taught me all your ways for world domination." This made Aizawa cry. Nezu smiled, saying, "Sounds like something I would do." The screen finally showed a title that made two students blush. Kendo's husband, the girl in question, stuttered, saying, "Does that mean that Midoriya and I are married?" The chaos user nodded his head, but Kendo then asked, "How? We didn't even know each other before UA." Surprisingly, Mineta answered her, "Look, even though I'm jealous of that Midoriya for scoring a babe like you, this is another universe, events happen differently." The girl nodded her head. Discord then said, "You know, through my travels, you were the most girl from 1B in a relationship with another version of myself." This made the Orangette blush, followed by Tokuj, who smirked, Yui, who kept a calm expression, Ibara, who hid behind her vines, Leiko, who had a small blush, Pony, who covered her face, and finally Kinoko, who simply huffed, being the last. The Chaos user then said, although my personal favorite is Ibara, the girl now resembled a strawberry with Izuku, who was sharing the same predicament. Pony then protested, I thought you said I was your wife in your world. This earned a smirk from Mina, Toru, and Setsuna, who decided to grill her later. The Chaos being then corrected himself, shivering in fear, I mean aside from us. This seemed to calm the horse girl down, but everyone was shocked that he was afraid of her. A single thought echoed throughout everyone's head, I guess I know who wore the breathes in their relationship. The scene finally began to change from darkness. Everyone looked around, seeing a bridge above a river accompanied by a rainy day. On the bridge, a lonely figure could be seen standing. This made everyone worried, as they thought that this person was Izuku, ready to end his life. Bakugo was biting his nails off, afraid that this version of the nerd actually took his advice. All their assumptions were thrown outside the window when a voice started narrating. Not all men are born equal. That was a life lesson I learned the hard way since I was 4. Aizawa blinked a little, saying, this doesn't sound like my problem child. The voice sounded familiar, but he couldn't point it out from the rain. It sounded like the students here. Shoda then looked at Tetsu, and said, doesn't that sound like? The metal boy silenced him by saying, I don't want to know. Ever since the day that I was diagnosed as quirkless, my life became a real living hell. The scene was now showing a memory from the person on the bridge. It showed a young girl with orange bright hair sitting on a stool in a doctor's office, with her mother squeezing her hand tightly, so much so that the girl began to whimper in pain. The girl looked at her mom, who held a smile that behind was the worst scowl in the world. The woman then stood up and began to drag her daughter, saying, let's go, Itsuka. We don't want to bother the good doctor anymore. The little girl then said in a groan, Mommy, you're hurting me. And I dropped my Miruko toy. Can I go grab it? The woman looked at the girl with a look that made the little one squirm in fear. Be silent, or else. Got it? Little Itsuka could only nod her head, not understanding what was going on, or why her mom was angry at her. A huge scream went through the area as everyone screamed, Kendo, you're the one on the bridge. This made the orange-head's gut have a bad feeling about what was going to come to that version of herself. The girl rubbed her shoulder, saying, it appears so. But that woman doesn't look like my mom. So I presume that different world may mean different moms. Discord nodded his head, adding, true. For example, in some world Izuku is Shoto's twin brother, so that means Rei is his mom. This made the bicoloured boy look happy, while his mother smiled, saying, I would like to be the mother of someone as polite as Midoriya, but... Yes, he trains them to the bone, but sometimes you pour it on both of them, on one of them, or one of the two save each other, and some you don't do it at all. This made the white-haired woman sigh, but at least she knew that in some worlds, her mental breakdown doesn't happen. Izuku began to wonder if he was going to be quirkless or have a quirk given that case. Some would think that my parents being heroes would prevent them from hating their own daughter, but apparently not. For that, I learned that sometimes those close to you could be your worst enemy. It now showed Itsuka being thrown to the floor by her father, yelling at her, you useless brat, you couldn't manifest a quirk. What are the people going to say about us? The daughter of the Iron Fist and a plasma disc, he is nothing but a quirkless nothing. He finished as he kicked the 4-year-old in the head. The girl looked at her mom, and whimpered, Mommy. She was caught off by a slap. Shut up, I can't believe that you couldn't even manifest a quirk. Anything would have done it, even something as useless as hand enlargement. Why couldn't you be like your other siblings? But I can still be a hero, Mommy. The girl tried to argue back, only to be punched by her father, saying, don't call us that, from now on, it's only sir and, got it? Yes, D.A. I mean sir. The man nodded as he yelled, go to your room, and don't come out till we call you. And for that day forward began 7 years of hell, where my family would treat me like an outsider. My own parents kept me out of family events. My own siblings were taught to hate me and use me as quirk practice. I was barely fed, and I was never allowed outside my room except for school. Kendo looked with a shocked expression at this version of herself, and felt her tears stream down her cheeks as she said to Izuku, is this how you were treated, Izuku? The boy shook his head, saying, no, thankfully my mom wasn't like that. She supported me all the way, and always protected me. Izuku said as he hugged his mother, who hugged him back, but he mentally thought as he remembered that different worlds have different events, at least this version of myself, that is. Vlad King looked at the screen with disgust, as he said, to think, pro-heroes would do this to their own daughter just because she's quirkless. The man then wiped a tear that fell from his eye. AFO smiled as he hoped that this quirkless girl fell into his hand, but for the title, he knows she was saved. You would that my best friends in the world would support me in my time of need, but I was sadly mistaken. The moment I told them I was quirkless, they both turned against me. For that I learned never to trust anyone too quickly. It now showed a scene where Itsuka was with two other girls. One had black hair tied in a ponytail, and the other had wavy green hair. The girls looked at her as she said with tears in her eyes, "I'm quirkless, and my parents hate me." She then wiped her tears as she declared loudly, "But I'll make them love me again when I become a hero." The two girls looked at each other as if they were having a silent conversation, and Setsuna said, "And how are you planning on doing that? You're nothing but a quirkless freak." The orange head seemed betrayed as she said, "Set. She right, Kendo. You can't be a hero." Momo said as Itsuka tried to reply saying, "But I can try." Setsuna then cut her off saying, "But you won't. Do you know why? Because you're a quirkless freak." The two girls then began to circle her saying, "Itsuka's a quirkless freak," and from that day forward, those two made it their life mission to always make my life as painful as possible. They used to hit me, steal my lunch if I had any, ruin my homework, and turn their quirks on me. Both Momo and Setsuna looked with shocked faces knowing that in this world they were Kendo's bullies. Discord then looked at Momo and said, "Don't feel too shocked. Some versions of you allow the money to get into your head, but this one is more of a the road to hell is paved with good intentions kinda thing." Setsuna sighed knowing that her being a bully wasn't a common thing, but Momo asked, "Why?" "Well, if you need to know why, in some worlds you are a bully. Like I said, the money gets into your head, and so does your quirk. For instance, in most worlds where you are a bully, you mostly target one of three, Kendo, yours truly, or Gyro." The Ravenet choked on her own breath knowing that in some worlds, she targets her best friend. But today was something special, and my two best friends did put on quite the performance. It now showed a scene where Kendo was crouched in the corner, blood dripping from her head as Setsuna stood in front of her reattaching her head with Momo holding a blooded metal bat. Setsuna then said, "Still trying to be a hero, little Itsuka? Well, here's some advice: go to the nearest river, and drown yourself in it, wishing really hard to have a quirk in your next life." The girl said with a laugh, only to stop a moment later registering what she said. The two girls in question had their jaws drop as they watched other versions of themselves beat their friend black and blue till she bled. Setsuna was the one most affected as she heard herself suicide bait her friend. She tried to approach her friend, but the girl flinched and backed away from her for a moment before saying, "I'm sorry, Tokuj. It's just a little bit overwhelming. I mean, I just saw myself get beaten half to death and suicide baited." The girl tried to laugh it off, but everyone could feel how uncomfortable she was. The green-haired girl replied, "No, I'm sorry, Kendo. That version of myself just said something so horrible, and it's right for you to feel a little bit unnerved after that." The orange-haired girl smiled at her friend as she hugged her, and then looked at Momo, who had tears, and hugged her too. The scene now returned to the bridge, as Itsuka stood in front of the railings looking into the water below. She then said, "Only one step and all my pain will be gone." One of them yelled, "No, don't do it." Her friends held her hands and basically smothered her as if she was the one who was about to throw herself off a bridge right now. Discord's sweat dropped as he said, "You know she can't hear you, right?" Monoma then said, "How can you be so calm about this? I mean, she must have been your friend in your world too." The being replied, "When you see different versions of yourself killing themselves, you become quite strong and disinfected against these sort of things." This caused the boy's mouth to be clamped shut knowing that this person must have seen some really disturbing stuff. He then added, "Plus, help is on its way." The orange-haired girl was about to jump when a voice called out to her, "Hey, are you okay?" She turned around to dismiss whoever was talking to her. When she turned, she was greeted by a concerned face. The man who greeted her had emerald green eyes and freckles, but the most important thing was she felt a safe aura emitting from him. "Do you need help?" the man asked again. She could have just told him that she was fine and to go away. She could have just tricked him and continued with her plan, but she didn't know what drove her to look at him and let herself fall into his embrace as she cried out with tears streaming out, "Please, I really need help." And on that day, I've learned that good people haven't died yet and that there's always a light at the end of the tunnel. Everyone breathed a sigh of relief as Yui said, "Thank God, Izu came to marry her." This made the orange head yell at her friend and say, "Yui, don't say it so causally. It's embarrassing." She then covered herself with her enlarged hands, while Izuku was trying to sink into the ground from the amount of teasing he was receiving from the boys and some glares that he didn't know from where they were coming. Vlad then said, "Thank God, nothing bad happened. It really would have been disturbing to see my own student kill herself." AFO, on the other hand, said, "It would have been a great opportunity to find a right-hand person from Tomura to help him dominate the country. Such a waste. It was probably the perfect person." All Might then said, "Then I would have saved her." The villain smirked as he said, "Like you saved your MSTR." The hero tried to attack him only for the second user to punt him in the head and say, "This is one of the many reasons I refused you, you're too emotional." 3 years later it now showed two individuals running inside a lab of sorts. They were on a steel bridge overlooking some tubes that continued some weird deformed humans. All Might then said, "Your work, AFO." The man laughed and said, "You have to admit that my work is really impressive given the combinations that I make. I mean, I do make weak quirks into super effective killing machines." All Might just scoffed. Awase then said, "Did we just have a time skip, and I guess that whatever happening here has a relation with Kendo?" The being nodded as he pointed back to the scene. From below, explosions were being heard as a figure was jumping from one side to the other yelling profanities at the two scientists. One of them then yelled to his partner, "Run to that door, at the end of the hallway, there's an emergency exit we can use." The other nodded as they reached the end of the hallway. The other scientists tried to open the door but recoiled back from the heat. Then suddenly, the door began to melt as blue hot flames began to emit. The first one then yelled, "To the bathroom, there's a vent we can use to escape." Darby's eyes went wide as he wondered why was attacking a facility of AFO. The two ran to the bathroom, but when they entered the second noticed that there was no vent, and asked, "Are you sure there is a vent?" The first one then answered him, but he was shocked when he heard a girlish voice. He turned and saw his partner melt before his eyes as a girl with messy blonde hair and cat-like eyes responded, "Don't worry. The vent I mentioned depends on how much you cooperate with us." She then brandished a knife to his neck. Suddenly the door of the bathroom was blasted open as two figures walked in. One of them was macabre work of burnt skin, while the other had his face covered, but what stood out was his grenade-like gauntlets and small explosions were emanating from his hands. The scientists asked, "What do you want from me?" He tried to back away from them. The burnt figure replied, "It's not what we want." He pointed to a mirror, "It's what he wants." The scientists looked at the mirror only for a man to appear from it, and walk through as he grabbed him, and asked as his other hand hardened, turned into a claw, was covered with green fire, and pointed to his neck, "Where's all for one is hiding?" Screams of pain followed that question. Shigaraki then said, "What the F? How dare they attack Sensei's facilities? I bet Sensei will destroy them." AFO on the other hand then said, "I don't think it's as simple as that, young Tomura. I think whoever this person is, he can hold multiple quirks. So that means two things: one, he has all for one like me, or he has a very strong copying quirk. And if he has one like that, this means he must be stockpiling quirks like me, and given the explosions from the figure beside Darby, I'd take a safe bet that this is young Bakugo, and the other figure is young Midoriya. And I will take a safe bet that I'm his father in this world, given that he can handle multiple quirks." Shigaraki seemed shocked by the explanation, while All Might scoffed that someone as nice as Midoriya will come from that monster. He looked at Discord, who had a very casual look in his eyes making him dread everything. It now showed a scene inside a house. It showed a bedroom where someone was sleeping, but then he was woken up by another saying, "Wake up, sucker, it's time for school." The girl in question whined saying, "No, I want more cuddles. School can wait a little bit." The figure replied saying, "No, it's time for school. Come on, get up. I also need to take our angel to her school before returning home to sleep from my night shift." The girl burst from under the covers hugging the person. The person had emerald green eyes and freckles on his face. To Izuku, he was her lovely husband, the man who saved her from her dark world, and brought her to a place where she felt safe and cared for. He was Izuku Midoriya. She then tackled him in a hug saying, "Cuddles." The girl in question began to steam as she looked at the green-haired boy who have already passed out at this point, and had Uraraka and Tsuyu try to wake him up. She really wished she can pass out too. She was so embarrassed, but at the same time, she felt happy since that version of herself found happiness. Aren't they too young to be married though? She wondered. Tokuj walked up to her with Mina saying, well, look at that Kendo. Who knew that you were a cuddle type kind of person? And what do you know, you have a daughter with Greenie in that world? The girl shook her head as she said, "I'm not. I mean I am. I mean." Discord then neck-chopped Tokuj, who pouted, and said, "Leave her be, more embarrassing moments will come going on forward, and you'll be among them." The green-haired girl then stopped as she continued to watch, making a vow to tease the hell out of Izuku when a world where she's a couple with him appeared. Izuku said, "All right, 5 more minutes, but you have to get up," he said as he kissed her forehead, and then added, "By the way, we're going to the Bakugo's house today for dinner." The girl smiled because she was going to see her brother figure, Katsuki. From the outside, he may appear to everyone as a JRK, but he's really one of the most caring people she ever met, albeit in his own rude way. Bakugo stared in shock. There's a world where a quirkless person sees him as a brother figure. It just made him feel weird given all the abuse he put his friend through. Izuku then asked, "Can I ask 2 questions? First, how are we married, and we're that young? And second, why is Bakugo nice, and we all know that he's a piece of trash?" This caused the explosion user to get angered saying, "Do you want to die, carrot head?" He was ignored. Discord answered her, "Well, for one, in that world quirkless people are legally adults by the age of 11, so both you and Izuku are adults, so you can be married, but Izuku's case is complicated a little bit. As for Bakugo, he has his own reasons. And why are quirkless people adults in that world? Is it to give them special rights given that they're really disenfranchised?" Okako asked. Discord gave her a blank stare as he said, "No, it's to give their parents a reason to kick them out without legal repercussions." The girl quickly deflated knowing how quirkless people had it rough. The door was flung open as a figure quickly barreled itself into both Itsuka and Izuku, only for Izuku to say, "How are you, Angel?" The figure was then revealed to be a little girl with curly green hair and emerald eyes, but when Izuku rubbed her head, a little white horn appeared. The girl answered, "I'm really good, Daddy." She then looked at her Itsuka and said, "And Mom, you should really get ready for school today." Itsuka popped out of the hug with a small pout as she said, "No fair, both of you and your father teaming up against me. I want a revote." She then hugged both of them, before sighing and saying, "I'm ready." Back with the audience, Eri innocently looked at both Kendo and Izuku, and asked them, "Does that mean you're both my new mommy and daddy?" The 2 teens fidgeted as they tried to weasel their way from answering that question. One wrong move and it could make the girl extremely depressed. Finally, Kendo gave in saying, "Yes, sweetie, that makes us your mommy and daddy." The little girl then grabbed both their hands and smiled saying, "Can you 2 hug each other like those 2? Both teens blushed, but they powered through, not wanting to make Eri feel sad. Izuku discreetly shot Aizawa a dirty look, who only gave him a sht-eating grin that meant he enjoyed his misery. Eri then hugged them both saying, "I really love mommy and daddy." This made both Izuku's and Kendo's hearts melt. At the same time, they couldn't help but feel a combination of deadly glares feel on their backs as if they were prey, and a predator was waiting for them. Izuku sighed as he slammed the door shut after All Might left his house. "It's like One for All has something against me. Why does my wife have to hold this cursed quirk? And to top it off, she has to face my villainous father of all people. Today was great, at least as great as it can get in Izuku's mind. Yesterday, he gained a new quirk from the scientist he beat the SHT out of. It was some kind of eye laser quirk. Pity that he chose to work for my dad. A disembodied voice echoed out saying, Izuku Midoriya, real name unknown. His quirk is permanent copy, which allows him to copy any quirk factor regardless of the type. Mutations are his less favorite, but he has a huge arsenal of them, including the quirk of the number 2 hero Hawks. Izuku Midoriya was a lot of things: a loving father, a good husband, an awesome bartender, and lots more, but the thing he hated about himself was that he was a lair. He hated that he had to lie to Itsuka about his real identity, who he was, and that he had a quirk. He hated that he had to lie about where most of their money came from to her. He hated that he couldn't just tell her the truth, but he just wanted to keep her safe from his dad's clutches. The man had a serious liking to destroy the lives of anyone affiliated with an OFA user, but now she was in the crossfire, and he wasn't about to get caught in it. He was moved out of his thoughts when Itsuka said, I can't believe it, Izu. All Might wants to train me, and wants me to have his quirk. Isn't that awesome? The boy using a quirk he copied from on the street that allows him to smile no matter what said, yeah, that's really great. And I can't wait for you to prove all those doubters wrong, my sucker. The girl blushed as she covered her face, and said, all right, I'm off to the dojo. The teacher wants to teach me a new technique before I go to the entrance exam. The boy flashed her a smile and waited till she left the house. He then took out a weird-looking phone and called it, saying, guys, code transfer has occurred. I repeat, code transfer has occurred. We need to double our efforts to find him. AFO was laughing so much that he almost had a vein pop. The man was half to double over and roll on the ground as he said, that's really hilarious. My son shares our hate for One for All, though it's because of the curse that accompanied represented by me. Nana could only look at that Izuku and sigh, understanding what he was feeling at the moment. Hawk said, how the heck was he able to grab my quirk? A smack from Endeavor to his head caused him to turn to the flame hero as he said, what the heck, man, why did you smack my head like that? The flame hero then said, I smacked you because of all of that handshaking you do all the time. I'm sure he pretended to fan to gain your quirk. Be careful, we don't need someone like that in our world doing that to you. The winged hero looked down at the ground as he thought about what the flame hero said, and nodded. AFO then said, it must be amazing for my son to copy One for All, or at least its components, and do the thing I failed to do. This causes Yuichi to say, what are you going about, brother? He can't copy One for All. The man nodded his head, but retorted, read the description of his quirk better. It says that copies the quirk factor, not the quirk itself, and yours is made of 2, so he was able to copy your transference quirk and the one I gave you, and now that I think about it, that version of young Midoriya has a non-lethal all for 1. This caused the other users of One for All to be shocked since the quirk stockpiled their quirks too, which means he also got their quirks. Izuku walked out of the bar that worked in, as he entered an alleyway. Suddenly all of his clothes began to shift and mutate, till finally, he was wearing a black jumpsuit with dark gloves. On the gloves' fingers, there were portal openings for the fingers. The rest of the suit was rather simple. He continued to walk from one place to another till he finally reached his target, which was an old rundown building. He kicked the door, as it opened, revealing his right-hand man Dynamite, or he knew him as his childhood friend Katsuki Bakugo. Even though they had a rough patch once Izuku's quirk came in, they made it through it. They both had the same goal, sending AFO 6 feet under. Shigaraki scoffed as he said, good luck with brats. I bet Sensei will blow that version of Bakugo and Midoriya away even with all of the latter's quirks. Kirishima had to restrain Katsuki from attacking the man. He looked inside the room to see both their allies Darby and Himiko waiting for him. Darby, when he first met him, was hell-bent on killing his younger brother Shoto Todoroki as a way to get vengeance against his father, but Izuku through hard work managed to convince him to directly attack his dad by revealing the man who he really is. Who knew the number 2 was such an but? Himiko was a complicated case. She was a wronged spirit that both boys managed to save before she turned to the wrong side. It was one of Izuku's day patrols when he saw her. She was about to attack her classmate, but jumped down scaring the boy, and took her away. The girl begged him not to hurt her, and told him her story. The boy felt sympathetic for her knowing how it feels to have a shitty parent, so he and Katsuki helped her through their contacts in their underworld, or mainly Izuku's contacts, given that at the time Katsuki hadn't started his vigilante career. All the Todorokis looked at Darby, who sighed and said, "Yeah, I'm too here." He looked at the screen to see a vigilante version of himself. "It's nice to see a version of myself where I lived my dreams, and didn't become a walking representation of pure hatred." Himiko could only look with tears in her eyes to see a world where she wasn't forced to be a villain to live. Well guys, All Might finally decided to pass his quirk. They all looked at him as Darby asked, "Did you manage to get what you want from him?" The boy nodded. Darby noticed the annoyed look his face had, and said, "What happened in their little vigilante group? He was the big brother that kept everything in check." Izuku sighed. "All Might chose, from the millions of people in Japan, my wife to be his successor." He threw a dirty look at Katsuki, who looked away and shouted, "I didn't see the slime villain, okay? Do you think that a bug like that would have got me?" Himiko said, "Come guys, don't fight. We have to find a way to prevent it, or at least change All Might's mind." It was then that Izuku lifted his arm saying, "No, I just can't do to her. This is her opportunity, not mine. I can't just come onto her and tell her that she can't have the quirk." Darby crossed his arms saying, "What do we do now? Your dear old dad will find out about the quirk transference, and come knocking on your front door sooner or later." The boy slumped against the wall thinking about the different forms of torture he wants to put All Might through for his worthless stunt. He rubbed his forehead as he said, "Things got complicated a lot, but for now we need to start plan nighttime." All Might shivered as saw a different version of his successor planning to hurt him, asking, "Why does that young Midoriya hate me so much?" Aizawa replied, "I can understand why. He rather hates you for your move giving his wife your quirk that comes with its own arch-nemesis, who by the way is his father, as a bonus feature. Honestly, I was shocked how kept a calm face when you walked into his house telling him about the quirk he hated so much, and didn't try to kick you. I know I would, anyone would. I think he wanted this version of Kendo to become a quirkless hero, so she could a symbol of hope." Izuku wondered out loud from his embrace with Kendo and Eri, "I wonder what that nighttime operation is." Discord then said, "All right, that's enough for now. Let's see your opinions on what you saw." The third universe Discord looked at everyone waiting for them to give their opinions on the world that they just witnessed. Surprisingly, AFO spoke first. "I admit the concept of this universe is quite alluring. The son rebelled against his father and tried to defeat him only for one of his loved ones to carry out that mission without knowing it. It reminds me of a manga story that I once read." This caused Yoichi to groan in annoyance. The man chuckled as he said, "Is there a problem, brother?" The younger Shigaraki just said, "I should have never introduced you to the Demon King manga. If I knew that you're going to try to become Demon King Overlord, I would have introduced you to Love Nobles." This made the users of O for quirk an eyebrow as the third user said, "Yoichi, what are you saying? 'Cause what I heard means that AFO came to be because he read a manga." The first user sadly nodded his head as the other users just facepalmed knowing that their nemesis probably defeated them using manga tropes. Kendo could only chuckle knowing that the monster Izuku would face one day is only strong due to manga tropes. She looked to her side where she was still hugging the green-haired boy, with A between them, who was giving her an unimpressed look. "Well, I find it educational. I mean, it opened my eyes to how the world is truly unfair, and made me strive to become even a better hero. An All Might." She looked at the blonde hero. "It would be an honor to be your successor." She finished as the blonde hero smiled. Discord then said, "Minami, what do you think?" Izuku replied, "It's kinda cool. I mean the ability to copy quirks. I can imagine a super move using Hawk's and Ryuku's quirks with a fire, something like Rin's quirk, and a porcupine quirk, and some steel nails." The boy continued to carry on till Eri flicked him on the nose saying, "Daddy, you're muttering." The boy chuckled as he looked at her, and smiled. He looked behind him as he felt some glares aimed at him. He saw Monoma and Tetsu with visible ticks on their foreheads and began to sweat bullets. Kendo looked behind her as well, and she saw Uraraka and the rest of the 1A girls glaring at her angrily. She simply blew a raspberry at them and mouthed, "I got him first. Deal with it." Unknown to the green-haired boy, the entire population of girls in the first year has a crush on him, with each girl trying to get him to notice her affection, but nothing seems to work given that the boy seems oblivious. Discord could only look and snicker at Izuku's situation as he saw the teachers putting a bet on who will end with Izuku after this. He then sweat dropped as he said, "Did they forget that they will forget everything once I send them back?" He then shrugged as he went to them. "I say that he will have a HRM of 1A, 1B, and my." The teachers nodded as All Might chose Okako, Midnight chose Momo, Vlad King chose Itsuka, Power Loader chose Mai given that he was the only person the girl talked about, Ectoplasm chose Tsuyu, Hound Dog chose Ibara, MIC chose Kyoka, Nezu chose same as Discord, Lunch Rush chose Mina, Cementos chose Setsuna due to his belief that opposites attract. Snipe chose surprisingly Yui, saying that the boy seems to understand her without her talking when he once saw them studying together in the library. Eraser chose Toru, saying that Izuku is the only who seems to understand her. 13 chose the same as All Might, and Recovery Girl after sighing for the 100th time chose Kinoko, shocking everyone. Discord shook his head as he added, "All right, we had a small break." Everyone talked and had a break, but before we continue. He snapped his fingers, restoring AFO's face as the man cheered for being able to breathe. "Does anyone still have anything to say?" Katsuki replied, "Yeah, if Deku and I aren't there in the USJ, who saves the extras? And also who saved Round Face if Deku doesn't go to UA?" The second question caused the girls' eyes to widen, but Discord said, regarding the first question, "You both came to their rescue because yourself from that world managed to gain information about the attack, but Izuku being reckless was waiting for them at the USJ, and you had to make up an excuse with your mother so you can go and help him." This caused Katsuki to look at Izuku, who chuckled awkwardly now out of the hug, but he was still leaning against Kendo, who was playing with his hair. And for the first question, Kendo saved her, although a little bit more wisely. Though in Izuku's defense, she did get over 3 months after meeting All Might, given that after she met Izuku, she started to train to be a hero. He stopped for a little before adding, "She still broke her arm though to destroy the 0-pointer. Any other questions?" Discord asked only for Todoroki to say, "What happens after that? Or can you tell us some important details?" Discord nods as he says, "Well, Kendo trains for OFA, she receives it, she breaks her arm, All Might gets a huge lecture from Izuku, she gets into UA, and stuff happens. I don't want to tell anymore because it will take the fun out of it further down the line." Shoto only nodded to that. A lot more questions came out, but most of them weren't worthwhile, so he said, "All right, next world coming right up." The worlds began to flicker as it finally rested on one, Teacher Izuku. This made Eraserhead lift an eyebrow, imagining 2 All Mights teaching at UA, so he had to ask, is this a world where he was born earlier? Discord shook his head, causing the man to wonder how he became a teacher if he wasn't born earlier, but he knew he will understand soon, so he didn't push it any further. The scene shifted to inside Nezu's office, where a smiling Nezu was seen along with a small man wearing a yellow suit with a baffled-looking Izuku and All Might. "I'm sorry, Principal Nezu, but I don't think I heard you right," Izuku said as he looked at a gaping All Might who was shocked as much as he was. When he was called to meet Nezu in his acceptance letter, he didn't expect the rat god to say, "Congrats on becoming our newest teacher in addition to All Might." Both he and the hero looked at each other, still not believing it. Aizawa looked at the screen with shock, as he copied the reaction of All Might and Izuku of that world. Nezu could only laugh maniacally as he said, "Oh, Discord, I see why I made you my student in that world. You truly are a MSTR of chaos. I'm honored that I was able to be a teacher to you." Aizawa asked, "How in the hell did that happen? Problem Child wasn't able to control his power, so how will he be able to teach a class?" Discord bit his lip as he said, "Well, it's going to be explained right now, but I'll let you know that it's technically your fault since you put Izuku's name on the paper form for you and yours on the student form before stamping them. and sending them to Nezu, whose hands were tied and couldn't anything anymore at that point since it was finalized. Aizawa could only slap his forehead for what that version of himself did, and asked, "Please, was he?" Discord cut him off. Yes, he was. Kirishima figured his unbreakable mode before the sports festival. Aizawa sighed in relief. Nezu added, "I know that this might seem a little bit unnerving given that you have no control over your quirk, and you aren't a hero." The boy only nodded, so Nezu carried on, "I really want to change what happened, but my hands are tied given that the rules state that the homeroom teacher can't be changed under any circumstances after what the previous principal did." Izuku nodded his head, remembering reading about the incident once. Izuku shook his head saying, How will I be able to teach a C class if I am not a H hero?" Nezu nodded understanding saying, "A warranted worry, but no problem, I already have a plan for everything. First, the man over there is Gran Torino, All Might's old homeroom teacher." Izuku looked at him as Torino cracked his knuckles and smiled menacingly. "He will train for the next 2 months to MSTR with other teachers training you in other things such as combat and rescue tactics till the end of the 2nd month, where you'll be applying to obtain your provisional hero licensing exam." Izuku's jaw dropped as Nezu added, "And technically, you'll finish your 1st year here. As for your cover story, you'll be introduced as All Might's protege, who he was training in secret to take his place once he retires, to the hero commission, so they will agree. All in all, by the end of the year, you'll be the youngest hero in the world." Izuku blinked saying, "So, I'll have an entire year compressed into 2 months, another into 3 months, and a third into 3 months. Nezu smiled as he said, "True, I'm happy you understood the situation quickly. You were surprisingly more accepting than the teacher who was supposed to teach you, and now is your student." Izuku massaged his forehead as he looked at All Might, who looked flabbergasted. "Okay, I accept, not that I can't, but I have one request." Nezu was now cackling madly as he said, "Truly magnificent, I wonder who young Izuku will act like a teacher. I bet that the me of that world could have easily reversed that decision, but he only didn't because he wanted to mess with Shouter." Eraserhead nodded, knowing that was something up the rat's alley. On the student's side, Okako said, "Deku as our teacher. Wow, that must have been awesome. I mean, imagine all the things he has for us in his notebook, and if he was given our quirks before he met us, that means he was able to analyze us more." Todoroki added, "I admit it is truly intriguing how is he able to teach us given how he was at the beginning of the year." He remembered how his best friend used to shiver at the slightest sound. Momo giggled as she said with a blush, "I believe that Izuku has great teaching capabilities, and I'm sure the other teachers gave him some tips, but I only want to see Aizawa-sensei's reaction to the first day." The other students nodded their heads as they imagined how sessed their teacher will be regarding this, given how he acted toward Izuku at the first of the year. It was now on the training field as students from both classes were waiting. Kendo sighed as she said, "Where is Vlad-sensei? He told us to come here with our sister class to perform the assessment test together, but he's nowhere to be found." Momo replied, "Truly, it's frustrating. The boy who met us in the class told us that our homeroom teacher will meet us here, but he's a no-show." She looked at Okako, who seemed a little bit dejected given that the boy was the one who saved her, but he was forced to drop out cause his mother couldn't pay the school fee. "Uraraka, I know that you're sad, but how about I lend him a hand? I'll see if I'm able to put him in general studies, and then maybe he'll be able to advance to the hero course through the sports festival." The Gravity smiled at that. On the other side, Bakugo was worried. He knew that Izuku's mom was working day in and day out, but this was troubling that his mom wasn't producing enough money to put him in school. Kamakiri of Class 1B looked at his sister class and saw someone that quipped his interest. He was an older man who had shaggy-looking hair with a tired look on his face, so he asked, "Aren't you a little old to be here?" Kamakiri blushed in embarrassment, as the others laughed at him and his question. "Do I look like I want to be here?" Aizawa said in annoyance. He hated the idea of allowing the glass cannon to run a class, but it was his fault in the first place, so he couldn't argue much. And by the look of it, the problem child wasn't even taking his job seriously. Honestly, what was Nezu thinking allowing His thoughts were cut off as he felt something punch him in the back, slamming him to the ground and knocking the wind out of him. The jaws of the hero course students, specifically 1A, dropped as they watched the scene unfold. Kaminari asked in shock, did Midoriya manage to get the drop on Aizawa-sensei of that world? Mineta then looked at him, I think so, but that's impossible. How was he able to do that? Mina added, what truly shocking is how they didn't notice him sitting in a small tree behind them all the time. Everyone turned to her as she was known as a person who had zero awareness of her surroundings. Aizawa himself was going through many emotions. First was anger for that version of himself letting his guard down. Second, pride for his problem child managing to get the drop on him. And lastly, happiness that the problem child managed to find a way to make the first day more interesting. Bakugo looked and he was about to yell when something kicked him in the face, sending him to the ground with a thud, only to be followed by Todoroki a couple of seconds later. 2 minutes later, the entirety of the hero course was on the ground groaning in pain as their mystery attacker stopped as he said, I kinda expected better, but I'll give you a break given that you're on the first day. He looked at Eraser saying, but that doesn't excuse someone who is a pro not to notice my attack, or notice that I was hiding in a tree all this time. The students all stood up as Ida asked, who are you, and why did you attack us? The attacker was wearing a green suit with white gloves, and some braces for his legs and hands with a bunny hood and a breathing apparatus. The attacker tilted his head as he said, I thought you'd recognize me by now, but no matter. I'm your homeroom teacher, and I was testing your awareness of your surroundings, and you all failed horribly. Ida bowed saying, I see, please forgive. It was then that Mina yelled, oh my god, I know you. You're All Might's protege. He then removed his hood saying, good, from now on, I'll be the homeroom teacher of Class 1A, he said as Vlad King came up next to him and said, and today, you truly set the bar lower than expected, but like he said we'll let it slide given that it's your first day. Okako yelled, you're the falling boy. She pouted at him saying, and you made me worried that you weren't in the hero course, but you're our homeroom teacher. Why didn't you say so? My bad, but I wanted to give a false sense of security. Who would expect the innocent-looking boy to be planning your beat-down? Izuku said as everyone nodded their heads, even Eraserhead who pride was hurt, but one reaction stood out as Bakugo yelled out in anger saying, Deku you bstrd, you had a quirk and never told Me. You've been looking down on Me. He began to run toward him. All the students looked at Izuku who seemed that he wanted to melt into the ground as A asked, Daddy, why did you hurt Mommy? The boy began to fumble as Kendo answered her by saying, we were only training sweetie. He didn't mean to hurt me. The girl satisfied nodded her head. Aizawa looked at his student giving him a thumbs up as he said, good idea, Midoriya. Toru added, but that was really painful. She noticed Aizawa's unimpressed look, but she quickly added, I wonder what he also has planned, and what he's planning to do with Bakugo attacking him. Tsuyu patted her on the back again saying, nice save for the second time. Might wanna stop while you're at it. Bakugo wasn't able to make it far as he was knocked out by Neckchop, and was thrown to Eraser. Izuku said, from now on, you'll all refer to me by Midoriya-sensei. And like Ashido said, I'm All Might's personal protege better known as Jade Phoenix. Bakugo jumped saying, like SHT Deku, it's bad enough you managed to pass, now you're my teacher. I won't accept AFU. He was silenced when Izuku said, then leave. What the F did you say? Bakugo replied. You heard me. I have the power to expel students I don't want, and there are a couple of students who have wonderful quirks in the general studies area that want to be in the hero course. Bakugo's entire body froze. As he felt his soul leave his body because at that moment he knew that Deku was F-serious. Look Bakugo, I know that you don't like me and I don't like you, but as of right now your fate is in my hands, so do your best to behave. The blonde growled at the statement but nodded his head nonetheless. Everyone then felt afraid, but only one girl was not convinced. The students looked in shock as they saw Izuku practically blackmail Bakugo into SBMSN as the blonde merely growled like his counterpart. AFO said, well, that's the sign of a good teacher. Why are you so shocked that he did that? He was only keeping the boy in line. Yoichi bit his lip as he said, you're right, brother. I hate it when you're right, but you are. I also don't get why everyone is shocked that he blackmailed him. Izuku looked around, noticing Momo's skeptical look. He wondered if he should burst her bubble and tell her that he can expel them at a hat's drop, but chose not to because she already seemed down from the previous beat down. He looked at his class, but one of the 1B students then said, "You know it's not fair that 1A students literally get All Might's protege as a homeroom teacher, no offense Vlad-sensei." He was a blonde with a smug-looking face. Izuku sighed as he already expected this, but said, "This is not important. Now, let's move on to the good stuff. Now, you'll have an assessment test first with your quirks and second without them." Vlad carried on, "Each of you will do 8 tests twice. Some of you might think of it as a waste of time, but we want to check your physical state given that there are some situations where your quirks will cause more damage than good. Now, any questions?" Momo raised her hand. "Sensei, I know that it's not my place to ask, but what did Bakugo mean when he said that you were hiding your quirk?" This caused Izuku to sigh, knowing that this question was going to be asked. "Well, if you need to know, my quirk only came in 2 months ago. All Might has been training me for the past year when he met me and took me in. Now, I would like to keep the condition of that meeting to myself. All Might wanted me to study under him or someone from the top 10, however, something came up and I ended here." He threw a glare toward Aizawa, who scoffed. "Wow, Midoriya seems to be angry at Aizawa-sensei." Zero said as Soto added, "I know I would. Man, just imagine it, 3 years compressed into 1 year. He might go crazy." Aizawa sighed as he said, "I can't really blame him. I mean, he's a teenager who's now supposed to play teacher and guide an entire class full of students. I only hope that Vlad gives him a hand navigating this thing." The BLD hero nodded, saying, "I hope that too, though I must give him credit though, he seems to be doing wonderful till now." Eraserhead gave him a blank look as he added, "I bet once the class is over, he'll fall over in the teacher's lounge." The BLD hero hummed, agreeing with him, while Izuku seemed offended at the notion, but couldn't help agreeing with him. Bakugo yelled, "Bullshit, quirks manifest when you're 4, 6 at most. You." He was cut off by Kendo from Class 1B as she said, "Well, that's not exactly right. There is a record for the oldest late bloomer was 35, so having a quirk appear at 15 is rare, but possible." This made Bakugo's head spin as he couldn't accept that his target had a quirk of his own. Kirishima then yelled, "That's so manly. We have a prodigy teaching us, and he's also All Might's successor. That's so cool." Izuku's sweat dropped as he had one thought, if they only knew. Ida added, "I see, then the reason you went to the entrance test was to scout us, students. To see which one of us was taking the test seriously, and who has heroic qualities." He clenched his fist as he said, "I can't believe that I embarrassed myself in front of All Might's successor, and chastised him." Momo nodded her head as she added, "I also believe they put him in the test if a robot malfunctioned. These things could happen, but if they had a hero, or at least a hero in training among the contestants, the safety of the test will be wonderful." Her eyes sparkled as she said, "I can't wait to see what wisdom you have to give us." Similar sounds of happiness were being emitted, but Izuku just sighed as he said, "All right, you're happy that I'll be your teacher, but daytime is being wasted." He looked at Bakugo, who was still shocked, and said, "Come here and stand in the circle. I want to throw the ball with your quirk the hardest you can." Bakugo smiled as he took the ball and walked to the circle. "Don't hold back." The boy heard Izuku telling him. He grinned evilly as he threw the ball with a huge explosion. Izuku's phone was now connected to the ball as it timed, with Izuku humming in approval. He then said, "Try it without your quirk now." The boy obliged, albeit less happy. The device timed once again. He held Bakugo's scores being 810 and 80, saying, "These are good scores, Bakugo." The boy puffed his chest in pride. Everyone hummed in approval, seeing Izuku acting as a teacher. Some laughed at their counterparts' reaction to Izuku, while Bakugo seemed happy with his scores in that world. Nezu hummed, "I gotta give him credit. He's taking his role better than I expected. I have a feeling that he had some sessions with me to help him get in the role." Discord nodded, saying, True, you spent with him 2 months when he wasn't training, teaching him how to be a teacher. You also helped him with his lessons, however, he had a different idea for the lessons for the first years. Aizawa hummed, saying, what did he plan? He was really intrigued to see what Izuku planned. Discord answered him, Izuku made the first year a huge joint training exercise because he didn't want the supposed rivalry between the two classes to go with them when they graduated. It took a lot of effort, but he managed to convince Vlad after he mentioned a certain incident that happened with 2 of UA's graduates a year before. Vlad asked, what happened? He had a bad feeling about this incident. Easy. 2 students, one from 1A and one from 1B, had their rivalry spark in the middle of a rescue mission, which caused their deaths and 20 civilians. Both teachers paled as they made notes to tone their rivalry. Meanwhile, Kendo gave Monomura a look that said, see what happens when you allow rivalry to cloud your judgment. The boy only chuckled. The 2 classes began to cheer as Mina said, we can use our quirks. That's really awesome. Zero added, this is going to be seriously fun. This sentiment was something that everyone agreed on except when Eraserhead said, fun. This is no place for fun here. You're here to become heroes if you can't take it seriously. He was cut off by Izuku saying, enough out of you. They're eager to learn and push themselves forward. This kind of spirit is what we need to be exported to the world. Add to that, they're in a safe environment where they can learn. Aizawa glared at him saying, you're not taking this seriously. This world isn't all sunshine and rainbows. You may be able to tank a hard hit, but they can't. Izuku replied, and you do. If I remember, you don't have to worry about punching someone so hard, he blows. And if I may remind you, you ruin people's life at the drop of a hat by randomly expelling students who don't meet your standards, whatever they are, like last year expelling an entire class. What kind of irresponsible teacher expels an entire class, and to add to that gave them a black mark, ruining their lives forever? Aizawa scoffed, they had no potential. I didn't ruin their. More atta fewer, Izuku said, quirk cloud. It gives the ability to summon clouds, ride on them, and make them rain, snow, throw lighting, and many more. Aizawa looked at him intrigued. I found her with All Might trying to steal a store because her parents kicked her out the day you expelled her. She tried to apply for a job, but no one wanted an expelled student. Same thing with high schools. Currently, she lives with me and my mom while she doing a villain rehabilitation program. He gave Eraser an unimpressed look. You talk about ruining lives, but you do it so much it's actually funny that you lecturing about it. Izuku shook his head saying, you're the worst excuse of a teacher I've ever seen, so eager to traumatize your own students in the name of strengthening them. I'm pretty sure that they'll see that in the internships. And since you're so high and mighty, here's a test. In those 8 tests you have to do something to impress me, or you're expelled on the spot. Aizawa was shocked. He knew he was a hero, but he couldn't help but feel afraid. He then remembered what the other kid said about the boy, and began to wonder if his whole entrance exam was a test, and if this whole SWCH up wasn't an accident, but something to test if he was still worthy of being a teacher. All right, now that's over, let's continue the tests, Izuku said as he looked at the silent students. Aizawa was shocked at what happened. His student looked the same. The man began to wonder if this is what Izuku really thinks about him. It was easily established that his student had no trust in him at the beginning of the year, but now seeing this began to let him wonder how his student really feels about him. The students were shocked at how Izuku managed to put Eraserhead in place, as Kaminari and Mineta began bowing to him as they said, we are at your service, my lord. The boy chuckled with awe at their antics. He then said, come on guys, you know what that version of myself is saying isn't true. The 2 nodded their heads while the other members of 1A only bit their lips. On the teacher's side, Vlad commented, I have to admit this went horribly wrong quickly, but somehow he managed to tame Aizawa. The others nodded their heads as Vlad added, I'm only grateful that Aizawa reinstates them in our world. All Might nodded as he said, but I'm happy that this Izuku didn't cave in. Ectoplasm then said, I wonder what he will do about Todoroki given that the boy will hold back. After that small altercation, the rest of the tests went smoothly with Eraser giving it his all as he watched the green-haired boy observe him like a hawk watching its prey. The nighttime hero knew that the kid was signaling him out. He knew that he will expel him no matter what he does. And why shouldn't he? He was a pro, there was no reason for him to stay. It would be illogical for him to stay in the hero course, and it seems that his homeroom teacher feels the same way. And done, Izuku timed the last of the students finishing the endurance test, which was Momo Yaoerozu. He and Vlad have co-piloted the tests, with each watching their own students do their best. All right, you all did your best, and I'm very proud of you, whether be it from 1A or 1B. I hope that we'll continue to work with each other. Now, here is the ranking for both classes. It then showed a screen with both classes ranked as Vlad said, "Don't take this like it is your value. All of you are strong and capable. Those who are on the top don't slack off, and those who are on the bottom will work from there to bring you up." The top student in 1A was Momo, while Itsuka was the first in 1B. However, in Class 1A Shoto Todoroki was the last student in class, and even Eraserhead was shocked. Todoroki eyed the scene as he said, "Well, he did say that he wanted us to go all out. I kinda saw that one coming." Shoji then said, "You're not bothered that he basically failed you?" The boy shrugged, saying, "If Aizawa-sensei wasn't so focused on Midoriya at the first of the year, he would have done the same." The teacher felt even worse now. He did notice Todoroki holding back, but he was so focused on Izuku that he didn't actually address the problem at the time. The boy looked shocked as he asked, "Why am I last? I gave it my all." Izuku looked at him as he said, "I think I specifically told everyone to don't hold back, yet you did the exact opposite. Your information says that your quirk is half cold half hot, yet you only used your ice in this test, so you didn't go all out and you held back, which meant you failed the first objective, meaning you failed all the exams." Shocked gasps echoed as Momo said, "Sensei, aren't you being a little harsh?" Izuku looked at her. "If I allowed him to continue like this, then one day he'll go out there and die because he didn't use half of his quirk." He looked at Todoroki as he asked, "So, is there a reason you didn't use half of your quirk?" Todoroki replied, "I don't need it. I swore I would become a hero using my mom's quirk, and I don't need his quirk to do it." Both Izuku and Vlad looked at him, not understanding what he was going at, so Izuku said, "But you can't become a hero half-butting it. People's lives are on the line. What if a day came, and you couldn't use your ice to save them? What if you came against a villain who has a quirk that's able to counter your quirk?" Todoroki replied quickly, "That won't happen. If I ever came against a villain like that, I'll bury him in ice till he gives up. Are you willing to tell me why then? Or go to Hound Dog to talk with him about this?" "No," Todoroki replied calmly, which he noticed didn't sit well with Izuku. Izuku shook his head as he said, "I'm sorry, Todoroki, but that can't do. From now on, you consider your seat in the hero course frozen. You'll be moved to the general study course, and you have till the sports festival to prove to me that you deserve this seat, or else you'll be expelled." Everyone was shocked that Izuku just threatened Shoto with expulsion. Shoto himself didn't seem fazed too much because he knew that Izuku will find a way to make him use his quirk before the sports festival. He was mildly shocked that this Izuku managed to make him tell the reason why he didn't use his quirk, or at least a part of it, but it's a start. Okako looked at Izuku and said, "Isn't that a little bit unfair, Deku?" She was shocked when he shook his head. "Not at all, I mean it's what Aizawa-sensei said, the world isn't fair. That version of me did the best it can, and the only reason I was able to help Todoroki is that he told me his reason, unlike that version." Aizawa replied, "He's right. His assessment was spot on. And objectively speaking, he did tell everyone to go all out, and Todoroki failed to meet the objective, so he failed automatically on all the tests since he didn't meet the objective." The other teachers nodded as they gave ectoplasm money. Todoroki was shocked that he was now threatened with expulsion, so he yelled, "What makes you think you can do this? Do you think since you're All Might's protege, you can do whatever you want?" The students were shocked that Todoroki just shouted at him, but Izuku wasn't fazed. He calmly replied, "You're not the only one here on the chopping block." He looked at Mineta as he said, "Mineta, you did as I told you and went all out." The boy breathed a sigh of Relief, but I was told of your less than favorable actions toward the girls, and I saw everything during the assessment test. If you harass any girl, be it from 1A or 1B, I will expel on the spot. He then looked at Todoroki and said, but since you're so sure that your ice is all you need, let's have a duel. If you win, I'll admit that you can be a hero with only half a quirk. If you don't, a general studies it is. The boy looked at him and nodded. Everyone was shocked that Todoroki accepted, while the boy himself looked with a worried look, knowing how painful this will be for him. Man, how do you think we'll win? Zero asked Tokoyami, who replied, in the greater scheme of things, I think Midoriya. It makes sense since this version has more control. Todoroki looked at the challenge in front of him and internally smiled. If he managed to beat All Might's protege, he'd finally prove to that BSTRD that he doesn't need his fire. The boy began by making the largest iceberg he can, burying Izuku in it. He looked at his handiwork as he felt frostbite was forming, but it was worth it. He looked at everyone's scared faces except one BS homeroom teacher whose fingers were making a countdown. As the last finger went down, Shoto heard a huge shattering sound followed by something that wrapped around him, and the last thing he felt was something colliding with his face, knocking him out. Izuku stood over him as he retracted a black WHP, saying, that wasn't too hard, now was it? Everyone was shocked that all it took was one punch to take out Todoroki. He looked then at both Momo and Toru, who began to sweat, afraid of doing something wrong, but he said, Yaoyorozu and Hagakure, I took a look at your hero costumes and I disapproved of them. I want to both go to the support lab this after the classes finish so we can make a DNA suit for both of you, but sadly that means that you'll be forced to use your our clothes for your first heroics class. Do you have any problems? Both girls shook their heads as Izuku finally landed on Aizawa. Aizawa, given that you're a pro, you're expelled. But don't worry, Nezu still wants you around, so students, meet your new quirkless combat instructor. This made Aizawa grin evilly, unnerving the students. Izuku then addressed both classes. Look, I may have looked with Todoroki right now like some tyrant, but I have all of your best interests at heart. Here, you are all going to give it your all or fail so you can learn from your mistakes, because in the field there are no redos. A hero needs to be ready to do anything to protect people's lives and has to throw out any personal issues he has outside the window. For that, here at UA, you'll be all trained till you reach your limit, and after that, you'll still be training, but don't panic, we'll be there to carry you to safety, so that's why I want you all to Ghost Plus Ultra. And someone please help Todoroki to the infirmary. Finally, Vlad said, now that this is over, all of you go to your classes and pick up your syllabus. With it, you'll find a small packet that Jade did that can help you use your quirk more effectively. You all are dismissed. And with that, both teachers went away with Aizawa on their tail, probably to sign his new contract, but Izuku stopped and said, and 1A, expect a new student tomorrow in Aizawa's place. He said before carrying on. Todoroki said, well, that was definitely something. I have to admit it was kinda satisfying seeing Midoriya expelling Aizawa-sensei. It's kinda funny. Aizawa from the side gave him an unimpressed look as he said, like how it was funny seeing you get kicked into general studies for half-butting it. You're lucky I didn't take notice of this, or you have taken Midoriya's place on the chopping block back then. This made the boy chuckle nervously, knowing that this is very true. Mineta said, why did that Izuku threaten me with expulsion? It's only natural for me to compliment girls. He was slapped by Tsuyu, who said, don't be a perv, and he wouldn't have threatened you. Discord smiled at her as he said, you know that some versions of you date him. The girl's eyes went wide as she fell to the ground, passed out, with the girls from her class running to her aid. Momo looked at him and said, please tell me you're joking. He shook his head and added, you too. The rich girl felt that she was about to throw up, but he carried on, but those versions of the little midget are respectable people who changed their perverted ways and stopped trying to put cameras in the girls' restroom. Momo sighed, knowing that she wasn't dating a pervert, but that statement raised a couple of red flags regarding the camera bit. Izuku walked with Vlad to the teacher's lounge. Once they both entered it, Izuku fell to the ground as All Might said, who was your first day, my boy? Izuku looked at him with a panicked face, absolutely terrifying. He asked the blonde hero, were you watching us during the assessment test? The blonde hero chuckled as Izuku said, do you think I did the right thing regarding Todoroki? I mean, I did come too harsh on him. I really didn't want to come off as a mean person, but he was holding back and refused to even tell why, so I had to take some steps to push to use the other half of his quirk. Vlad then said, I disagree with you. You did the best with what you could do at the moment. You even gave him a second chance, something Aizawa wouldn't. It's now up to him to decide whether he wants to be a hero or not. All Might then added, he's right, young Midoriya. You know that the world isn't a safe place, and heroes need to be ready to give it their all, or else they'll die for all their trouble. If young Todoroki doesn't learn from today, then he isn't fit to be a hero because he will eventually let someone die, and kill himself in the process. Izuku nodded as he finally managed to calm his heart rate, and asked All Might, so how's your plan for tomorrow coming along? Everyone began to murmur, as Izuku said, I have to admit that this will be my reaction if I was put through a case like this. It was so terrifying, I honestly thought that Todoroki was about to bury in the next ice age's worth of glacier before I challenged you. The bicollared boy chuckled at this friend, though internally he agreed with him, and I wonder who is the student who will replace Eraserhead's place. This made Shinso give him an unimpressed look, and I wonder who Endeavor will react to the news about his son. He looked at the flame hero who answered the question. First, I'd probably berate Shoto. To that, the entire family nodded their heads. Second, march down to the school for an explanation. Again they nodded. Third, I'd probably train him harder. Discord then said, okay, let's move on before we enter uncharted areas. So what do you think of this world? Fourth Universe Discord swam through the air as he waited for them to talk. When Aizawa began, I admit that problem child rose to the occasion in this one. He was put into impossible odds where most people will most likely fail, but he persevered and carried on. The first day, in my opinion, went perfectly swell. He gave the students a lesson that they will never forget, that appearance is deceiving regarding the debriefing he gave them in class and then the beating. He stopped for a moment before adding, no further comments. The students agreed with the teacher, but then Vlad asked a very important question. That world said that the first year was to be considered a huge joint training exercise. So what happened in the battle combat and the USJ for the example, given that my students were also there this time around? In the background, Monoma could be heard cheering because in that world they had their fair share of action. He was sent to silence by a neck chop from Darby who was sitting near him. The Chaos Lord nodded his head. Well, for the combat exercise, it was the same as yours except each team consisted of a member from 1A and 1B, and both Bakugo and Monoma were put on suspension due to their behavior during the exercise. Bakugo was put on suspension because he used his grenades on Kendo after she managed to beat him and his partner, which was Kaibara. Said boy groaned knowing what his version went through, and almost killing 3 students. Monoma for wanting to flex 1B's superiority, ignoring his partner's reasoning, which was Shinso on 1A, somehow managed to gain Shoto's quirk before the exercise and froze the building the training was happening in. Mina tilted her head as she asked, but Shoto did this, and he got scot-free. Discord shook his head. He got off due to his opponents not being affected by the cold. In this world, Monoma's opponents were Tsuyu and Setsuna, both are cold-blooded. When the entire building was iced, both girls' bodies began to experience hypothermia, and if it wasn't for both Vlad and Minami of that world telling Monoma to heat the building, both girls might have died. This caused more than one person to throw a dirty glare in Monoma's direction as the boy himself tried to shrink into the ground. The only reason both weren't expelled was due to All Might personally asking for both to be given a second chance since everyone deserves one. Of course, due to the suspension, they weren't present in the USJ. Everyone nodded their heads, while both boys seemed a little bit sad that they weren't in the USJ, but still happy because they weren't expelled due to the stunts that they both pulled, and managed to survive the consequences of their actions. Discord carried on. As for the USJ, it was the same, All Might using his time on petty crime. This caused the symbol of peace to groan while AFO laughed with Tomura, Vlad, Aizawa, and Izuku were the teachers. The students got separated. Everyone survived the fight and managed to escape, but that brings us to the Nomu. Unlike this world where it was sent to fight All Might, in this one the petty crime was arranged by AFO himself to distract the symbol of peace so Nomu can kill Izuku. This made the blonde hero clutch his head in fear for his successor of that world, but Izuku, with the help of Aizawa and the activation of Nana's quirk, was able to send the Nomu flying sky high, but that was after he destroyed both his arms to save the students. It was due to his actions that only he was injured. In this world, when Kurogiri tried to activate his quirk on 13, Izuku saw this and warned the hero, who stopped her quirk just in time, before helping Ida escape to bring help. Though let it be known that if it wasn't for Ibara, who was in the flood area whisking Izuku away after defeating Nomu, Tomura might have dusted him. Everyone was shocked at how different was the USJ from their world, and how close to death's door their friend, and the girls, their crush, were. Itsuka responded by hugging the boy hard in fear that he might actually die. The boy himself was stunted at how one detail changed Tomura's mission entirely. With All Might, he felt horrible. In that world, everything was a distraction to kill his successor, and the villains almost succeeded. Tomura, on the other hand, snapped his fingers at the lost opportunity. The users of OFA were shocked at the extreme changes in that world, but Nana was happy that Izuku managed to survive. Mina, trying to change to the subject from death, said, "Wait, you said Ibara saved him, does that mean they became a couple?" Discord shook his head. No, the you of that world asked him out after the first week, but Izuku refused, saying that it's wrong for a teacher to have a relationship with his student, even though Nezu gave him a green light given that he was in the same age as his students, but Izuku still refused, seeing it as abuse of his position. Mina nodded her head, as teachers all mentally praised that Izuku for his actions. Even the villains were impressed. But then again, he was engaged at this point, so yeah, this caused several girls' heads to snap, but Discord then said, "All right, let's move to a brand new world." Both Shigaraki brothers applauded for the reference. The scenes began to change before it finally landed on something that read, "Endeavor's son-in-law." This made the flame hero jump, saying, "What? Midoriya marries my little princess in that world?" He looks at the boy and says, "You better treat her right." The boy nodded his head as he tried to hide, scooting closer to Kendo, making the others jealous. Meanwhile, Fuyumi was a blushing mess, not because she liked the boy, but because the subject itself was embarrassing. Shoto looked at him and said, "Midoriya, I'd be more than happy for the son of All Might to marry my sister. In fact, I can arrange a marriage right after we arrive back in our world." Both Izuku and Fuyumi yelled at him, "Don't say that so casually." Izuku looked to his side and saw both Dabi and Natsuo glaring at him, causing him to ask himself what did he do to deserve this. Discord shook his head as he said, "And whoever said it was Fuyumi who Minami was married to me?" This caused a lot of confusion. Only Rei seemed to have an inkling of an idea of who was the lucky girl. Endeavor really hated this. He really hated going to the commissioned special training grounds for children to use their quirks freely, but his public team told him that it might help him increase the reception of his image in the public, which according to them, wasn't doing well, or not well enough to outclass All Might with his stupid smile. He also secretly hoped that this little venture might convince his masterpiece to stop the childish rebellion it was making. Beside him, he was dragging a young 10-year-old girl with her hair equally split between red and white. Its end was tied into a ponytail. She also had multicolored eyes, where her left was blue while the right was gray. On the left side of her face was a burn mark. She was his youngest daughter, Shoko Todoroki. It took only a moment for the males of both hero classes to register this before they exploded into laughter, with Shoto plainly saying, "Oh, so he's marrying me." Everyone was shocked at how casually he said it, but he then stood up, marched to his mom, and sat in her lap as he buried his face into her chest, with the woman chuckling, seeing her son perhaps for the first time blush in his life. She petted him and said, "Come on Shoto, I'm sure it's not that bad." Shoto only in embarrassment, as both Dabi and Natsuo were snickering beside him. Fuyumi herself was trying to hold in her laughter, but Endeavor only shrugged at the development because to him, Shoto is Shoto, be it a girl or a boy. The girls, on the other hand, weren't so sure how to process this. On one hand, they were jealous of Shoto, on the other, it was funny as hell. Izuku meanwhile was trying to comprehend this as he looked at his other self and said, "You're worse than Shigaraki, at least he wants to kill me, not embarrass me." The Chaos MSTR laughed with Nezu as the scene carried on. Enji looked at his daughter and said, "Look, Shoko. Learn from them, and see how better you are. How you are going to carry on my legacy and defeat All Might." The girl merely glared at him as children began to pool in the arena to fight a bunch of robots made for 10-year-olds. Enji had to admit that this was the most boring time of his life. He was treated to the spectacle of seeing various children defeat one robot only to be stomped by 12 other robots. It was a waste of time, to say the least. He wasn't impressed at all with them. He was about to leave seeing that he and his daughter finally agreed on something for once, but HSPC representative said, "Please endeavor, I promise you the next pair will be quite interesting, to say the least." The hero grunted and sat down. The field then announced the name of the next pair of children, Izuku Midoriya and Katsuki Bakugo. "Please enter the field to test your abilities." Bakugo then jumped saying, "Wait, there's a place where I can train my quirk." He looked at his mom and yelled, "How come you never took me there, you hag?" This was met almost immediately by a punch as Mitsuki yelled back, "If you weren't such a self-entitled brat, then I would have taken you there. Every time I tried to tell you, you'd say I don't help from a bunch of extras to MSTR my quirk, and never allow me to finish." The boy simmered down. Izuku, who was silent, then jumped happily saying, "Wait, I'm there, so that means I have a quirk." The boy began to cry as Itsuka hugged him with a, "Don't cry, Izuku, you're great with or without a quirk." The boy smiled at Itsuka as he said, "Thanks, Ken." "Itsuka," the girl said with little redness on her cheeks making the boy blink, "I call you by your first name. It's only fair you call me by mine." The boy smiled awkwardly as he said, "Thanks, Kei. I mean Itsuka." Meanwhile, a certain girl was simmering with anger. "That was supposed to be my moment with Deku. I'm sure one of those world Deku is my boyfriend, so I'll just have to wait before I have my chance." Eri looked at Izuku and asked, "Deku, you're going to marry that girl, right?" The boy blinked at the question but nodded. The girl then asked, "So does that mean she's my mommy too?" The boy was shocked and didn't know what to do, so he said, "No, Eri. She's not here, so she can't be your mother, but once she comes back she will be." The girl nodded her head excitedly about having another mother. The boy only hoped that this won't become a trend. Enji scratched his head as he vaguely remembered a man named Hisashi Midoriya with curly black hair and freckles that can breathe fire was in general studies when he was in the hero course back in his UA days, but other than that he didn't recall much. He suspected the Midoriya boy had some fire breed-related quirk, but that wasn't really impressive. The exercise began as the blonde-haired blasted away destroying the robots, but the Midoriya kid surprised him when he lifted his arm and blasted blue fire from his hand. Both he and Shoko stood up remembering Tuya, but instead of burning the robots were frozen in place with ice on them. This caught Enji's attention. The boy then summoned red flames that engulfed his body, turning his hands into demon claws of red fire, his feet in two sharp-toed feet from red fire, gave him a spiked tail of fire, and flaming wings. The boy then flew through robots, slashing them left and right. He was then up in the air as he activated green flames in his hands, making a bow and arrow and raining the robots with flaming green arrows, but then he added a blue taint to the green arrow which caused the robots now when the arrows hot them to freeze. Enji now was fully invested in what was happening. He looked at his new intern Burnin and told, "Go to the testing field. I want to see both of the boys' abilities, especially the green-haired one." The flamed-haired girl flashed him a thumbs up before saying, "You got it, boss man." She left as the boy unleashed a huge breath of orange fire, burning some robots as the other kid yelled at him for hogging all the fun. Everyone blinked at how strong Izuku's quirk of that world was, as the boy himself was writing down notes. "So red flames give me some type of demon mode, orange are regular flames, blue is ice fire, green is for making shapes and objects. I guess the regular flames and ice ones help maintain my body temperature like Shoto, so I don't overheat or experience hypothermia. From the looks of it, I can also combine both flames to have more effects." A booped him on the nose as she said, "Daddy, you're muttering." AFO scratched his head wondering how such a quirk wasn't taken by him, but he only shrugged it to the Midoriya family having a different doctor other than Koyudai. Endeavor himself was shocked at this quirk. If it existed in his world, it would have made Izuku the strongest flame user out there with how versatile the quirk seemed to be. This is a strong quirk. A gloomy aura enveloped him, but this means I signed my daughter in a quirk marriage. I'm really some. Ray proceeded to comfort him by saying, at least it was to someone who would take care of her and treat her well, not to some random guy in your agency. Back with Izuku, he looked at a sessed-off Bakugo. Deku, stop destroying the robots. I want to test my skills too. Sorry, but wasn't you who said you're going to beat me? He scratched his chin as he said, guess, you admit defeat then. Bakugo looked at him with a demonic look with little sparks coming from his hands. He was about to attack when green flames came right at him and Izuku, causing the green-haired boy to erect a wall of green flames as Bakugo said, great work nerd, that's why you'll become my favorite sidekick. This irked Izuku a little, but he swallowed it as something jumped over the green wall of flames and landed behind them. The boys looked and saw what seemed to be a flame-haired girl with sharp teeth smirking at them. So both of you are that managed to catch the boss's attention. She looked them straight in the eye saying, I'm not impressed, but here's your chance to impress little kids. She then sent a torrent of green flames toward them, but Kutsuki jumped out of the way while Izuku blasted a wall of bluish-orange flames as he urceted a wall of ice. Endeavor nodded his head. He seems very proficient in using his quirk. Combining the flames, using them individually, really tells you that he was training them for a long time. The man began to visualize what would be the quirks of their children in that world, earning him a slap on the back of the head from his wife saying, bad energy. The man frowned. It was then that Vlad King pointed something out. Doesn't that ice seems a little off? I mean, normally Todoroki's ice is white, but this one seems. The others nodded as Izuku said, well, combining the flames give different results, so maybe if I combined my regular flames with the blue flames, it gives us hot ice. The others rubbed their heads, unable to process how he was able to do it and analyze quirks on the fly. AFO applauded him as he said, truly impressive young Midoriya, to be able to analyze quirks on the fly is such a wonderful gift. Are you sure that you didn't have an analysis quirk before you were given OFA? The boy didn't respond, but he grabbed A and hugged her tighter as All Might and OFA users growled at the 200-year-old villain. Back in the observation room, Endeavor watched the battle and wiped his sweat due to the red ice the green-haired boy was able to produce. The ice defied the laws of thermodynamics, but it was there. He saw the end of the fight where the boy unleashed grayish-blue flames against his intern who was distracted by the blonde boy only to be caught in the ice. He wasn't really bothered, but then the flame Sunmo's head began to flicker out as if there was a force that was shutting them off. This tipped him that the grayish color wasn't for show. Finally, the boy walked to her and freed her. He quickly emitted a golden flame from his body that covered him, Burnin, and Bakugo, which healed their injuries. The flame hero said, I want all information about the boy. The HSPC representative gave him a clipboard with the essentials regarding the boy's age, BRTH date, where he lives, and more stuff the hero wasn't interested in. He then saw his quirk and read it, quirk multiflame, give the user different type of flames depending on the color. Orange flames are regular fire. Blue flames give him the ability to develop ice. Red flames give him demonic features. Green flames are used to create objects from stamina. Gray flames cause any person hit with them to lose the ability to use their quirk. Golden flames are used to heal people. Black flames are highly dangerous, given their violate nature, can erase anything it faces if the user wants to, and can't be turned off unless the user wants to. The hero blinked as he set down the paper. Shoko on the other hand scowled as her father took interest in someone with a flames quirk, but she then thought about it. If she manages to beat that boy with her ice, then she can prove that she can become a hero without his fire. Endeavor looked at the representative. I want to talk to the boys now. The man nodded his head and went to bring them. Even though it was Izuku's quirk that attracted his attention, Bakugo did decently with his fight against Burnin, so he decided to talk to him too. Izuku rubbed his chin as he said, so this me trains with Endeavor? He was about to say cool, but remembered what Shoto told him, DMN it. Shoto looked from his mother's chest and said, DMN it indeed. He then earned a light whack from his mom as he then snuggled some more into her. The flame hero only sighed in sadness knowing what was to come. It only took 2 minutes for the boys to come, and they seemed that they were about to rip each other apart, or at least the blonde one seemed like that. The flame hero cleared his throat as he said, "Hi there, brats." After that awkward introduction, a tense silence filled the room, but then Izuku broke as he began to fanboy. All the hero students began to laugh at the boy who groaned in embarrassment. "You're the flame hero, Endeavor. You're known for single-handedly solving the largest amounts of cases over the last 4 years. You're my idol, especially given how much control you have over your quirk. A lot of people say that you cause too much property, but that's definitely not the case given how you beat a guy who can control fire streams 2 weeks ago with only 1 store burnt, and this goes to show how much skill you have." He then pulled a notebook and asked, "Can you sign it please?" The flame hero was shocked but also felt his ego go up a few notches given that no one actually knew how much hard work he put into his quirk. Regarding the signature, he wanted to say no, but he wanted to get in the boy's good graces, so he nodded. He was about to take the notebook, but the blonde boy yanked the green one away. The blonde then said, "Yeah, nice try. That might work on fanboy over here, but it won't on me, so do tell me what you really want from us. You're usually a huge PP toward fans, so why the sudden change?" Endeavor was once again shocked, but he had to admit that this boy was keen and street smart. This caused his interest in the second boy to grow. For what the boy lacked in the strength of quirk, he more than made it up in street smarts. Bakugo smirked as he looked at Izuku saying, "See nerd, that's why we don't trust anyone on the get-go." Izuku chuckled awkwardly as he was playing with Ai's hair who was purring happily while Kendo played with Izuku's hair. Enji looked at the scene and said, "Well, I have to admit that normally I would be blunter than that, but it seems this version of myself is playing it safe to win both boys over." Darby nodded his head remembering the day his father told him he was nothing other than a failure, which caused him to go into the forest and set himself ablaze. The burnt man spoke, "True, and I hope I have fun burning your protege of that world." Izuku shivered at the bloodlust directed toward him, or at least that version of himself. The bloodlust disappeared when Fuyumi whacked her older brother on the head saying, "Don't do that to you." The boy groaned as he looked away from them with a frown on his face. The flame hero then went into business mode, straight to the point. "I see, well, have it your way." He then straightened himself up as he said, "I was impressed by both of you during this little training of yours, so what I want to say is that I want to train both of you, so you can become heroes." He looked at Izuku as he mentally added, "And maybe something more with you. Perhaps a worthy successor for the Todoroki family." Both boys went wide as they cheered on due to the fact that a pro hero wanted to train them personally, but then Izuku noticed something, or rather someone. "Who's that?" The flame hero looked behind him and saw his daughter trying to hide in the shadows. "Boys, meet my youngest daughter Shoko." He then looked at his daughter and took on his friendly father mood, or his equivalent of it. "Shoko, come and say hi to your new training partners." The girl glared at her father but sighed, saying in a flat tone, "Hi, I'm Shoko Todoroki. Nice to meet you." Silence filled the atmosphere as Izuku tilted toward Bakugo saying, "Awkward." The other boy couldn't help but nod. The flame hero silently cursed his luck. "Well boys, how about we go meet your mother so we make it official that I'm training both of you?" Normally, he wouldn't care much about the parents' consent, but given his plans for Izuku, he wanted to get in his mother's good graces, and maybe perhaps see if he can maybe persuade his father to agree to his plans. Rei gave her husband a sad look. "Really, Enji, do you honestly think that you can buy people just like you bought my parents?" The flame hero sighed miserably as he said, "I know, but I'm not him at least. If it helps, I scraped my plans to marry Shoto off to the Yaoyorozu girl weeks ago." Momo looked at him incredulously as if he lost his mind. To her, even if her parents agreed, she won't. She isn't some cheap bottle of booze that he's going to buy from the closest drink vendor. Shoto looked up at his dad and glared. "You're joking, right?" The man fidgeted a little as he nodded his head. He somehow managed to make his relationship with his son normal again. He didn't want to ruin it due to a slip of his tongue. Natsuo looked at his dad. "Something tells me he's not kidding." The Discord clapped his hand. "Okay, moving on before we enter unwanted areas of how corrupt the human society is, which we will see in the worlds that Izuku teams up or is taught everything he knows by Stain." Izuku's eyes went wide, but he gulped as he sent a silent prayer to the Eater of those worlds, while the boy himself looked on the verge of mental breakdown, Stain and Midoriya teaming up. This is the worst nightmare ever for any hero. It's been a year since Izuku and Katsuki began to train with the Flame Hero. The boys were trained to the bone. Nothing was too much to the man, he would put them in near impossible situations where he wanted them to win. Bruises were far and many on the bodies, but in the end, it helped. Izuku's gained more mastery over all his flames, his orange fire can now become hotter if concentrated, his stamina-related fires were now stronger and required less energy, his ice fire was now stronger as he could make now flames in sub-zero temperature, and he gained more control over his black flames. Bakugo on the other hand refined his techniques and learned how to control his explosions better than before. But one time during this something happened. Izuku was doing his regular training when he was given a break time by the hero. He walked outside only to see Shoko training her ice. The thing was that the girl was about to freeze over due to the amount of frost that covered her right side. The boy ran to her and said, "Todoroki, you need to stop. You're hurting yourself. Let me warm you up." The girl pushed him away saying, "I don't need his fire. I don't need your help, so go away from me." The girl tried to put up a tough act, but given her entire frame was shaking, she wasn't convincing that much. The girl tried to stand up to continue her training, but grayish-green fire wrapped around her hands. She frowned heavily. She still remembered the description of his quirk. He then said, "Stay still while I warm you up." The girl turned her head away as she tried to kick herself free only to see that she was bounded now by her legs. The boy then began to use his orange flames to warm her up. "You know you should seriously know your limits, and don't push too much." The girl in return scoffed, "Well, if it isn't the kettle calling the pot black. Have you seen yourself? My dad is beating you black and blue every day." The boy in return shrugged, making the girl's eyes go wide. "Really, you don't have a problem with being beat around like that? It's not that I like, but if you think about better to be beat around by your father other than to be beat around by villains who will kill me." The girl pouted as she looked away and was freed from her shackles. "I guess you're right." The girl then mentally said, "But that doesn't excuse the abuse he put us through." Unknown to her, Fuyumi watched the entire interaction. The older girl was shocked when she saw a small yet visible blush on her sister's face, causing her to smile. "Oh my god, Shoko has a crush. I really hope they get together. They seem so cute." Shoto began to groan harder at the embarrassment he was facing. His sister squealed in happiness. Oh, little Shoko developed a crush when the boy helped her after she was frozen. It seems like a story from a fairy tale book. Bakugo smirked as he looked at Shoto. "Hey, Isehot Bstrd, the dual-colored boy looked at him. "Do you want to cuddle with your Prince Charming?" The explosion user began to howl in laughter at the expense of the dual-quirked boy. His mother, on the other hand, found the entire situation really amusing. Her son wasn't known to be embarrassed easily. Hell, even if you walked on him inside the bathroom, he wouldn't be embarrassed. At most, he would be annoyed and tell you to get out. She looked at him as he tried to disappear away from everyone and laughed softly. She then began to play with his hair. She looked to her side only to see Natsuo coming closer to tease him with two-ear borderline exploding, wanting to join in the fun his siblings were experiencing. It's been 4 years since the Flame Hero has taken both Izuku and Katsuki under his wing to train them. Both have excelled and gone beyond their limits to become the strongest they can be. They were both 10 months away from the entrance exam. Izuku was taking the recommendation test while Katsuki was taking the regular one. While both boys wanted to take the regular one, the Flame Hero insisted that the green-haired boy take the recommendation test. Bakugo wasn't bothered too much by it since he didn't actually care. Now, they were in their mentor's house as he called them for something important, at least that is what he said. They sat in front of him with Shoko at his side as he looked at them. Finally, he broke the silence. "Midoriya, I want you to marry my daughter," the man said in the bluntest way possible. Both boys looked at each other and echoed the same response. "What?" Meanwhile, Shoko looked at the ground with an emotion other than anger. It was sadness. "I guess I'm the new breeding factory for trophy children for Endeavor's masterpiece." She stooped a little before adding, Now, I know how Tuya felt when I came around. Hey, that was a little blunt on my end. The flame hero said, earning a couple of looks that basically said, you think. Izuku rubbed his forehead. Okay, I honestly don't know where this came from, or why now. But I can't. I'm still too young for marriage, and so is Shoko, plus shouldn't we agree to this beforehand or at least get to know each other, or go on dates? The flame hero had foreseen this type of response, so he prepared something just in case. He nudged his daughter. The girl glared at him, so he spoke, you see, I don't want you to get married now, but more of an engagement. I still want you to focus on your hero career, so the of you next week will be engaged, and get to know each other. He looked at the boy who was still not convinced, so he added, if it helps, you can ask her, and she'll tell you how much she wants it. The girl glared, and she glared hard, and if looks can kill, her dad would be inside a coffin right now. She wanted to be a hero with her ice, not some type of trophy wife, but even now she can't have what she wanted. She felt weak, and that her life was hopeless. She was knocked out of her self-pity as she heard Izuku asking her something. She wanted to hate him, she really did, but given the confused expression he had all this time, she could tell he wasn't keen on this, but knowing her father, he was going to say yes whether he wanted that or not, and so was her. I'm sorry, I wasn't paying attention, can you please repeat what you said? Mina pouted. Man, look at female Todoroki's face. She means so sad, as if she knew that she doesn't have a choice in the whole thing. Other girls nodded their heads in agreement. Shoto grabbed their attention, that's because she doesn't have a choice. The girls looked at him with confusion visible on their faces. In my family, my dad's word is final, so if he told her to marry that version of Midoriya, she'll marry him unless she wants to face the consequences of defying him. Honestly, her fate was sealed from the moment Midoriya grabbed his attention. It's kinda sad, really. Izuku meanwhile felt like a scumbag for being a part of a quirk marriage even if he didn't know about it. He then heard Shoto say, Midoriya, it's not your fault. There's no way you would have had an idea what my dad was planning to begin with. I wouldn't be too surprised if he hadn't spent weeks and days trying to marry that me off before he found you. The green-haired boy smiled and nodded his head. What do you want to do, and do you truly want this? I won't force you if you don't want to. I mean, you have to be comfortable about this at the end of the day. Izuku said, and the girl can sense how sincere he was in his words, so she knew at this moment that she wanted to gain her chance in achieving her dream. I want to be a hero. The girl said plain and simple, which Izuku smiled at, saying, that's really wonderful, Shoko, and do you want to marry me? You didn't answer that. The girl sighed. She wanted to tell him that she had no choice, but instead just nodded her head because there's no point in trying to fight it. Izuku then said, okay, if you're okay with it, then I don't see why not give it a try, though if you want to back out at any moment, feel free to do it. The girl nodded again. The flame hero then said, Shoko, are you sure you want to be a hero? This is a dangerous profession that could get you killed, so how about you don't and just study at a normal course? The girl glared at him since she knew why he didn't want her to go to the hero course, because she refused to use his cursed flames. She was about to reply when Izuku spoke on her behalf. I think it's a great idea for her to be in the hero course. I mean, she's strong and she can look after herself, and so am I, but we both can get a little carried away at times, so I really think you should allow her to join. Endeavor went over his choice for a moment before nodding. He was this close to upstaging All Might, so he can't let this little hiccup stop him. The flame hero said, well then, let's call your mom to tell her the news. The boy paled as he said, Mom's going to have her lead flip off. I guess in this world I didn't want Shoto to be involved in heroics since I found a replacement, and didn't want her to kill herself like what happened with Tuya. Enji spoke as Darby shook his head, knowing the real reason was wanting really powerful grandchildren. Izuku then said, it's really weird knowing that out there I marry Todoroki. The bi-collared boy nodded his head. Discord popped out beside Izuku and Kendo. Well, enough of that, let's see what you think.